Hello, friends, and welcome back to The Snoozy Scientist, where we gently wander through the mysteries of science, one sleepy yawn at a time. Whether you're listening from the comfort of your bed, wrapped in a blanket, or drifting in that calm space between waking and dreaming, you're exactly where you need to be. Tonight, we are traveling to the deepest place on Earth, a place so deep that if Mount Everest were dropped inside, its mighty peak would still be swallowed by more than a mile beneath the ocean's surface. This is the Mariana Trench, one of the most mysterious places on our planet. Here, the seafloor falls away to nearly 36,000 feet, deeper than the cruising altitude of passenger planes, deeper than even the tallest mountain on Earth. The water here hovers just above freezing, and the pressure here rises to more than 1,000 times greater than at the surface, enough to crush a human in an instant or crumple steel like paper. Submarines that come close are imploded in an instant, and in this world, no sunlight has ever shone. It is an abyss of eternal darkness. Stranger still, it is not silent. Microphones lowered into the trench have captured eerie sounds, heavy bangs echoing like distant machinery, metallic groans where no ship could possibly be, and distorted cries that sound disturbingly alive. Scientists call it Earth's final frontier, a realm as alien as outer space. So we must ask the questions that haunt even the most rational minds. What lives in the blackness below? What strange forms have adapted to survive in such impossible pressure and cold? Why do scientists return from these expeditions, shaken and sometimes silent about what they've seen? And what exactly is hiding in the deepest darkness of our planet? Tonight, we'll sink slowly into this abyss together, exploring the most terrifying discoveries ever pulled from its depths. But before we begin, if you enjoy these journeys, gentle, soothing, and quietly filled with wonder, I'd be grateful if you gave this one a soft like and perhaps tapped subscribe. It helps other curious dreamers find their way to this peaceful little corner of the internet where science and sleep meet. And if you'd be so kind, let me know in the comments. Where are you listening from tonight, and what time is it where you are? It's always a joy to see how far across the world this little sleepy corner of science travels. Now take a slow, deep breath, close your eyes, let your shoulders soften, and let's begin our descent into the trench that terrifies even science itself. To understand the terror of the Mariana Trench, you must imagine pressure unlike anything we know on the surface. Down there, the weight of the ocean stacks endlessly upon itself, every layer pressing on the one below, until the force grows beyond comprehension. At the bottom of the trench, the pressure is more than 1,000 times the air pressing on your body at sea level. It is a number that almost means nothing to us until we try to picture it. Scientists often compare it to 50 jumbo jets resting directly on your chest, not hovering, not balanced carefully, but pressing down with their full weight. It is the kind of force that does not just break bones, it crushes steel, collapses machinery, and flattens anything not designed with almost impossible strength. In that darkness, the threat of implosion is always present. When engineers send down submersibles, every joint and panel is tested and reinforced, because a single weakness could spell disaster. The steel walls of a vessel are meant to keep the crushing sea out, but if they fail, the ocean does not seep in slowly. It comes in all at once. The water surges with such force that the craft folds inward in less than a blink, crumpled like paper. To the human mind, the thought is unbearable. A sealed space where explorers sit in fragile safety can, in one shuddering instant, collapse entirely, leaving nothing behind but silence. Even for the most seasoned scientists and engineers, this possibility never disappears from their thoughts. They understand the calculations, they trust the design, but the knowledge of what surrounds them gnaws quietly at the back of the mind. Outside their small bubble of air, is an endless ocean that does not forgive mistakes. It does not hesitate or relent. If a bolt fails, if a window cracks, if even the smallest flaw is overlooked, the abyss will show no mercy. Explorers who have descended into these depths often describe the experience as holding their breath for hours at a time, not because they are truly without air, but because the tension is suffocating. They know the physics, they know the safety measures, yet their bodies cannot forget the truth. They are sitting inside a hollow sphere, surrounded by millions of tons of water. It is a reality that presses not only on the metal walls, but also on the human spirit. Engineers sometimes run demonstrations on land to show what high pressure does to objects, and the results are enough to leave audiences gasping. A sealed container, strong and rigid under normal circumstances, will collapse violently when pressure is increased around it. In slow motion, the metal folds inward like soft clay, the air inside squeezed out in an instant. Now imagine that, not with a small container in a lab, but with a full submersible thousands of feet below the surface. The thought alone is enough to chill even the bravest heart. This ever-present danger shapes the way scientists speak about the trench. They describe it with awe, but also with unease. Even when nothing goes wrong, they admit that a kind of quiet fear rides with them on every dive. There is no bravado here, no pretending that courage alone can withstand physics. The abyss strips away illusions. It reminds us that we are fragile creatures who belong to the thin film of the surface, not the crushing silence below. Yet still, humans go. Curiosity pulls them downward into a place their bodies were never meant to endure. Inside those cramped spheres, explorers listen to the groans and creaks of the vessel as it adjusts to the weight outside. Every sound, every vibration reminds them that the sea is testing their creation. A single mistake would mean being crushed to nothing in a heartbeat. And yet they press deeper into the dark, watching the dials and gauges, listening to the hum of machinery, hoping that the engineering holds, hoping that the abyss does not notice them. It is easy, sitting safely on land, to imagine bravery as the absence of fear. But the truth of the trench is that fear is constant. It presses in with the water, it hums through the steel, it whispers in the silence of the abyss. Scientists admit that no matter how many times they descend, the fear never leaves them. It travels with them to the bottom, sits beside them in the dark, and only loosens its grip when they return to the light above. And still, the journey continues downward. The trench holds more than just crushing pressure. It holds life, sound, and secrets that defy imagination. From the weight that can shatter steel, we move deeper into the other mysteries that haunt the minds of those who dare to look. If the silence of the Mariana Trench is frightening enough, what scientists have discovered with their ears may be even more unsettling. For as quiet as the deepest point on Earth appears to be, it is not silent. The black water hums with noises that should not exist, sounds so strange and eerie that even the most rational minds struggle to explain them. To study the trench, researchers lower hydrophones, underwater microphones, sensitive enough to capture even the faintest vibrations. At first, they expected to hear very little. After all, sunlight cannot reach these depths and life here seemed scarce. Yet when the recordings came back, they were filled with strange sounds that startled and disturbed the scientists. Among the first were metallic crashes, noises that echoed like the clanging of distant machinery. There are no ships at these depths, no engines, no anchors striking rock, and yet the microphones picked up the hollow ringing of metal colliding with something solid. In the blackness where no human has ever walked, it was as if something heavy and unnatural had stirred. Then came the booms, deep, resonant pulses that shook the water like the sound of a great drum. Some were short and sharp, others stretched out in strange, rolling echoes. Scientists compared the recordings with known catalogs of whale songs, and some did line up with the vocal calls of large baleen whales. Yet there were others that did not match anything known. They were too loud, too irregular, and too hauntingly alien. One of the most famous of these sounds has been nicknamed the biotwang. It was picked up in the western Pacific by hydrophones in the trench, lasting for several seconds with a rise and fall that seemed almost mechanical. Some speculated it could be a type of whale call never before heard. Others were not so sure. The pitch and tone were unlike any known species, and the sheer volume suggested a creature of unimaginable size. Other recordings included long groans, like metal under strain, echoing out of the darkness with no clear source. Some seemed to move, traveling past the microphones as though something enormous had drifted by, its body pushing vibrations into the water. The thought of unseen giants moving silently through the abyss is enough to send a chill through anyone who listens. For the scientists studying these sounds, the most terrifying part is not what can be explained, but what cannot. The ocean is vast, and many of the noises might be geological in origin, created by shifting rocks, underwater landslides, or even the grinding of tectonic plates. Yet some of the sounds persistently defy categorization. They are not consistent with known earthquakes, not tied to volcanic activity, and not like any mechanical interference. They remain as mysteries, coded messages from the deep that no one has yet translated. To sit in a laboratory and listen to these recordings is to feel as though the trench itself is alive. The crashes and groans fill the imagination with pictures of colossal shapes hidden just beyond human sight. Even for those who remind themselves of scientific reason, the unease lingers. Humans are creatures of pattern. When we cannot explain a sound, our minds leap to possibilities, both wondrous and horrifying. Some researchers admit privately that hearing these recordings unsettled them more than any image taken from the trench. A picture may show a strange creature or a barren plain of mud, but a sound hints at movement, at action, at life that is just out of reach. It suggests the presence of something larger than the frame, something that refuses to be captured on camera, yet still makes itself known. When these recordings are played for the public, the reactions are almost always the same. People grow quiet, then uneasy, then curious. Some swear the sounds resemble engines, or the groan of a ship hull twisting under stress. Others claim to hear something almost like a scream, distorted by miles of crushing water. Each interpretation reveals less about the sound itself and more about the way human minds fill in the darkness with their own fears. What makes the unknown sounds of the trench so powerful is that they do not end when the recording stops. They echo in the imagination long afterward. They remind us that in the deepest place on earth, something is stirring. Perhaps it is only geology, the restless shifting of Earth's crust beneath the ocean. Or perhaps it is something alive, something vast, something that has never been seen but chooses to announce itself with a single groan, a single metallic crash, a single booming pulse in the dark. The scientists continue to listen, lowering their hydrophones again and again, hoping for patterns, hoping for answers, and each time the trench gives them fragments, sounds half familiar, half alien, that haunt their thoughts long after they surface again. These echoes are not just noises. They are reminders that the trench is not empty. It is speaking, and we have yet to understand what it is trying to say. From the eerie sounds, our attention drifts naturally to what lives there, because sound is only one clue of the life waiting in the dark. If noises can unsettle, the sight of what has been discovered in the trench is enough to leave even experienced biologists shaken. As strange and unnerving as the sounds of the trench are, what scientists have actually seen with their own eyes may be even harder to believe. Cameras lowered into the depths have revealed creatures so unusual that they seem to defy the very rules of biology. One of the most startling discoveries came not in the form of monstrous fish or lurking predators, but in something much smaller, at least at first glance. At the bottom of the trench, scientists discovered microbes unlike anything they had ever imagined. To most of us, the word microbe suggests something microscopic, invisible to the human eye, a cell so tiny it takes a microscope to even detect its presence. Yet in the Mariana Trench, this assumption was shattered. Researchers found single-celled organisms as large as a human fist, some even larger, sitting on the muddy seafloor like strange balloons. These organisms are called xenophyophores, and they are a kind of single-celled protozoa. Their existence challenges everything we think we know about the limits of life. A single cell should be impossibly small, yet these creatures stretch the definition of the word to a scale that seems absurd. Imagine holding your hand out and seeing a single cell the same size, a living bubble of life that is made of just one unit, not millions or trillions like us. To find such a thing in the most hostile environment on the planet has left biologists both fascinated and deeply unsettled. The pressure at these depths should crush life before it even begins, yet these giant microbes thrive. They do not merely survive, they dominate the seafloor in certain regions, spreading across the mud in eerie shapes. Their bodies are soft and gelatinous, fragile in appearance, but their presence is undeniable proof that life can find a way in conditions that should kill almost everything else. For scientists, the sight of these organisms was more than surprising. It was terrifying in its implications. If life can grow to such strange extremes in the cold, crushing darkness of Earth's deepest ocean, then what might be possible elsewhere in the universe? These giant microbes have become one of the strongest arguments for the possibility of alien survival. Planets and moons once thought too hostile to sustain life may not be so empty after all. When biologists first studied them, many admitted to a quiet fear, not because the microbes themselves are dangerous to humans, but because they rewrite the boundaries of what life can be. They are living contradictions, existing where no one thought existence was possible. To imagine a single cell swelling to the size of a hand is to imagine the rules of biology bending, and when rules bend in one place, they might bend in others too. Some researchers have pointed out that these microbes may hold clues about how life began on Earth. In their strange chemistry and resilience, they may resemble the earliest ancestors of all living things. The thought is humbling, even eerie, that in the black silence of the trench, we might be looking at echoes of life's ancient beginnings. But others take a darker view. They see these organisms as a warning. If life can thrive under such crushing pressure, feeding in darkness, perhaps life is not the rare miracle we once believed. Perhaps it is far more common, scattered across worlds that seem inhospitable. And if that is true, then what kinds of life might we someday meet? What kinds of beings might crawl, swim, or pulse in the hidden oceans of Europa, the icy moon of Jupiter, or in the buried seas of Enceladus circling Saturn? The trench microbes do not answer these questions, but they whisper them. They sit silently in the mud, strange oversized cells with no eyes and no faces, and by their very presence they remind us that the universe may be far less empty than we hope. Their forms are not monstrous, yet in their simplicity lies a deeper kind of terror, the terror of possibility, because if life is possible here, then life may be possible anywhere, and it is not only their size that troubles scientists. These microbes shape their environment, trapping particles, absorbing metals, and altering the chemistry of the seafloor. In their slow, patient way, they change the world around them. What might similar organisms do on another world? Could they create ecosystems entirely unlike anything we know, thriving in ways we cannot yet imagine? The very thought stretches the human mind into uncomfortable places, and yet the evidence sits right here in the deepest ocean of our own planet. From microbes the size of fists, our gaze turns outward again to the other strange beings of the trench. For if something so simple can become so vast, what might the more complex creatures of this abyss look like? The next glimpses of life will feel even more alien and even more unsettling. From the strange, oversized microbes that spread like living balloons across the muddy seafloor, the descent into the Mariana Trench reveals creatures that are even more unsettling to human eyes. It is one thing to know that a single cell can swell to the size of a hand, but it is another to stare at beings that look so alien that for a moment you forget you are still on Earth at all. In the deepest waters, researchers have encountered the ghostly shape of the snailfish. At first glance, it barely looks like a fish at all. Its body is thin, fragile, and translucent, like jelly molded into the faint outline of a creature. Through its skin, you can see the pale shimmer of its organs, floating inside like dim lanterns. It drifts in slow, graceful movements, a fragile ribbon of life surrounded by crushing weight. There are no bold scales, no sharp teeth glinting, nothing of the toughness we expect from a survivor in such an extreme environment. And yet here it is, thriving in conditions that should make life impossible. What makes the snailfish so disturbing is not its fragility, but its paradox. A body that looks so delicate it could melt between your fingers manages to survive at depths where pressure is fierce enough to implode steel. Scientists who first observed the creature admitted to feeling a chill because it was not just strange, it was otherworldly. This is life that feels less like a product of Earth and more like something designed for another planet entirely. Alongside the snailfish are the amphipods, tiny crustaceans that resemble shrimp, but with bodies that are transparent, glass-like, and eyeless. They move in swarms, flickering in and out of the darkness like shards of broken crystal carried on unseen currents. Without eyes, they navigate using senses humans cannot fully understand, responding to subtle vibrations and chemical signals in the water. Their glassy forms are nearly invisible against the black background of the abyss, making them both hunters and survivors, ghosts of the deep that are seen only when caught in the light of a camera. To watch these creatures together is to feel that you are looking at a world that should not belong to this planet. The snailfish drifts like a translucent ribbon, while the amphipods swarm in flashes of glass and shadow. In that moment, the line between science and science fiction blurs. Explorers and biologists alike have described their first impressions with one simple phrase: "This does not look earthly." Part of the unease comes from how unrecognizable these beings are. On land or in shallower seas, creatures carry forms that feel familiar. They have eyes, mouths, and movements that reflect the rhythm of the world we know. In the trench, these expectations fall away. A fish with skin so thin that its muscles and bones are exposed like delicate lace. A swarm of shrimp-like animals with no faces, no eyes, and bodies made of glass. It is as if the trench has rewritten the rules of life, carving shapes that obey laws no human mind has ever lived by. Some scientists have pointed out that these adaptations are not just bizarre, but brilliant. The snailfish's jelly-like skin helps it avoid the deadly effects of pressure. The amphipod's transparent bodies keep them hidden in the darkness where light never travels. What feels alien to us is for them perfect design, and yet understanding this does not erase the emotional impact. Seeing them still feels like looking at life born under another sun, on another world, in an environment hostile to anything we call familiar. These ghostly shapes stir something deep in human imagination. They remind us of old myths of sea spirits and monsters that dwell in unfathomable depths. They echo the strange forms imagined in alien encounters, beings with no eyes, bodies that glow or vanish, creatures that move with silence in places we cannot go. Standing on the deck of a ship, staring into the black feed of a camera as one of these beings drifts past, even the most rational scientist cannot help but feel a shiver. And perhaps that is the most unsettling truth of all. It is not only what these creatures look like, but what they suggest. If life here can take on forms so strange that they unsettle our very sense of belonging, then perhaps our imagination has not been wild enough. Perhaps the universe holds shapes we are not prepared to see. From the giant microbes that bend the rules of biology, to these translucent fish and glass-bodied shrimp that defy the shapes of life as we know it, each discovery in the trench carries us further away from what is familiar and deeper into the uncanny. And still stranger beings wait in the darkness ahead, each more grotesque and haunting than the last, as the descent into this alien world continues. As the cameras drifted deeper into the trench, past the transparent shrimp and ghostly snailfish, another creature emerged from the darkness that startled even the most experienced scientists. It was not large, nor was it violent in appearance, but the shape of it was so grotesque and so unfamiliar that the researchers watching the feed struggled to understand what they were seeing. This was a fish without a face. In the faint glow of the submersible lights, its body looked pale and featureless, like a ghostly shadow sliding through the water. Where one might expect eyes, there were only smooth folds of skin. Where a mouth should have opened, there was instead a blank curve. The front of its head was an empty mask, giving it an almost human eeriness, as if something vital had been erased. To stare at it was to confront the uncanny, a creature that belonged to Earth but looked as if it had been sculpted from the stuff of nightmares. For biologists, this faceless fish was a living contradiction. Vision is one of the most essential senses for survival in the natural world. Almost every animal we know relies on eyes to navigate, hunt, or escape danger. But in the depths of the trench, where not even the faintest ray of sunlight has ever reached, eyes are not only useless, they are burdens. Over millions of years, this creature had shed them completely, its body streamlining into a form built for absolute darkness. Instead of sight, it relies on other senses. Sensitive nerves trace along its body, detecting the faintest vibrations in the water. Chemical receptors pick up invisible signals, allowing it to navigate a world without light. In adapting to such extremes, the trench stripped this creature of its face, sculpting it into something at once brilliant and horrifying. Scientists marveled at its efficiency, yet admitted that its appearance stirred an unease unlike anything else. It was not simply different, it was unsettling in the way it mirrored a blank version of ourselves. The faceless fish reminds us that evolution does not create for beauty or comfort. It shapes survival, and survival alone. In the abyss, where the rules of the surface world collapse under pressure, life bends into forms that feel alien to us. To see a fish without eyes or mouth is to see the trench itself written into flesh, a silent message carved by millions of years of adaptation in the most hostile of environments. For those who witnessed it, the moment carried more than scientific curiosity. It carried the deep, primal discomfort of looking at something that should not exist. Humans are wired to seek faces in everything, to read emotion, intention, and familiarity in the arrangement of eyes and mouths. When that pattern is stripped away, when we are met with only blankness where recognition should be, the result is deeply disturbing. It is as if the trench itself is staring back at us, refusing to be understood. The grotesque adaptation of this creature has become symbolic of the abyss itself. It embodies the truth that the deep sea is not a place built for us. It is a reminder that life, when pushed into extremes, will contort itself into whatever shape ensures survival, no matter how haunting the result may appear to our eyes. In this faceless being, the abyss reveals its power to bend life into forms that seem closer to nightmares than to the natural world we know. Some scientists have described this fish as one of the most striking examples of how alien life might appear on other planets. If a single species on Earth can erase the face entirely, replacing eyes and mouths with hidden systems of perception, then what might survival look like beneath the ice crust of Europa or in the methane seas of Titan? The thought is both fascinating and terrifying, because in this blank visage, we see the possibility that intelligence itself could emerge in forms we would not even recognize as living. As the submersible lights faded and the faceless fish slipped once more into the black, the researchers watching the monitors were left with more questions than answers. They had seen a creature that had not only abandoned the features we associate with life, but one that seemed to reject familiarity altogether. It left them shaken, whispering quietly to one another, trying to put into words the unease that lingered. Some admitted later that it was one of the few times they had looked at life and felt that they were staring into something truly alien. From the faceless horror, the trench does not ease its grip. Instead, it reveals yet more grotesque adaptations. For if this is what survival can look like at its most extreme, then what other monstrous shapes might be waiting in the abyss, growing larger, stranger, and far more unsettling still? After the faceless fish slipped back into the dark, scientists thought they had seen the most unsettling adaptation of the abyss, but the trench had more to reveal. When traps were lowered into those depths and brought carefully back to the surface, they carried with them a discovery that shocked even the most hardened researchers. Inside, the nets were crustaceans, distant relatives of the shrimp and amphipods we know, yet far larger than anyone expected. Instead of the tiny, finger-length creatures we are familiar with in shallow waters, these were giants. Some measured more than a foot long, their segmented bodies stretching across the palms and arms of the scientists who first examined them. These supergiant crustaceans looked like shrimp magnified many times over, with their long antennae, spiny legs, and hard exoskeletons. But in their size, they seemed to belong not to the modern age, but to some ancient epoch when giant arthropods roamed the seas. The sight of them was almost prehistoric, as if the trench had preserved a secret world where nature continued its experiments without limit. The phenomenon that allows them to grow so large is called deep-sea gigantism. In the crushing depths, where pressure is immense and temperatures hover just above freezing, organisms follow rules very different from those near the surface. In many cases, creatures evolve to grow larger than their shallow water relatives, though scientists are still unraveling why. Some suggest that the cold slows metabolism, allowing animals to live longer and therefore grow to greater sizes over their lifespans. Others propose that the extreme scarcity of food encourages larger body sizes so that creatures can travel farther and store more energy between meals. Whatever the exact reasons, the result is unsettling. Familiar animals transformed into monstrous versions of themselves. To handle one of these giant crustaceans is to feel the uncanny weight of something you thought you understood, now reshaped into a form that feels out of place. The clicking of their legs and the glassy stare of their tiny eyes are no different than their smaller cousins, yet magnified to this scale, they become unnerving. What was once delicate and edible is now threatening, armored, and heavy, a reminder that scale alone can twist perception into dread. For the scientists who study them, The size of these creatures leads to even more disturbing possibilities. If shrimp-like amphipods can reach more than a foot long, what else might be growing in the blackness unseen? The trench is vast, stretching for thousands of miles, with most of its floor still unexplored. Nets and cameras can only capture fragments, leaving open the question of what might lurk beyond reach. Could there be predators following the same rules of gigantism, scaled up to lengths that rival the legends of sailors and myths of sea monsters? The ocean has always been home to stories of creatures too large to believe, yet in the depths of the Mariana, science and story sometimes begin to blur. What makes this possibility so haunting is that it cannot be dismissed outright. The trench is too large, too deep, and too rarely visited to say with certainty what lives within. For every supergiant crustacean brought to the surface, there may be countless others never seen, growing larger in the silence, hunting in ways we do not yet understand. It is one thing to imagine a giant shrimp scuttling across the seafloor, but it is another to picture what might be preying upon it. If life grows monstrous here, then predators may be monstrous too. The thought unsettles even the most rational minds. Cameras lowered into the abyss have captured only brief glimpses, shadows, and flashes of movement that suggest size without revealing full form. Each time, the footage raises more questions than answers. The scientists know that every expedition into the trench is a small candle in a vast cavern of darkness, lighting only a fraction of what exists. The rest remains hidden, waiting. In the pale light of the research ships, the captured giants are measured, photographed, and preserved. But when their bodies are held against the glow of the lamps, their features, so familiar yet so wrong in scale, remind us that the trench does not play by the rules of the surface. It builds its life larger, stranger, and far more unnerving. And if such oversized versions of common animals thrive here, it leaves open the terrifying question of what else may be waiting, larger still, deeper still, concealed in the unseen corridors of the abyss. From these armored giants of the seafloor, the descent continues. The trench has yet more paradoxes to reveal, where fragile bodies thrive in impossible pressure and delicate life survives against all odds, unsettling biology even further than size alone ever could. After the discovery of supergiant crustaceans, with their armored shells and unsettling size, scientists expected that the trench's harsh conditions would favor creatures built for toughness. Armor, bulk, and resilience seemed like the only paths to survival in a world of freezing water and relentless pressure. Yet what they found next was something that seemed almost impossible, a paradox that defied the very expectations of biology. In the deepest parts of the Mariana Trench, beyond 26,000 feet, lives a small, pale creature known as the Mariana snailfish. It holds the record as the deepest dwelling fish ever discovered on Earth, thriving at depths where nearly every other vertebrate fails. What makes it extraordinary is not only where it lives, but how it lives. Its body is not armored, nor is it monstrous in size. Instead, it is delicate, almost fragile to the point of looking unfinished. Its skin is paper-thin, translucent and soft, like jelly. Its bones are light and fragile, some barely developed, and yet this fish survives in one of the most unforgiving environments on the planet. The snailfish drifts through the water with a slow, ghost-like grace. Its body is pale, almost glowing under the faint lights of submersibles, with skin so thin that you can glimpse faint traces of its organs beneath. It does not look like a creature built to withstand unimaginable pressure. In fact, to human eyes it looks like something that should collapse under the weight of just a few feet of water, let alone the crushing intensity of the trench, and yet it thrives. The paradox of the Mariana snailfish unsettles scientists because it rewrites the rules of survival. Its very fragility is what allows it to endure. Instead of resisting the pressure with hard armor or heavy shells, it flows with it, bending instead of breaking. Its gelatinous body contains fewer air pockets and less dense bone, which means there is little inside it for the crushing weight of the ocean to destroy. Where steel would buckle and crack, the snailfish drifts effortlessly. It is, in a sense, indestructible because it is fragile. Biologists studying this fish have described it as one of the most remarkable examples of evolutionary adaptation ever observed. It does not fight the environment, it yields to it. It surrenders the strength that would destroy it and embraces delicacy as a shield. In this way, it becomes almost invincible in its world, able to go where no other fish can survive. For researchers watching the snailfish on camera, the sight was haunting. Here was a creature so delicate it looked as if it might dissolve in the light, yet it moved with complete confidence through the dark. It seemed to embody the abyss itself, silent, pale, and patient. To see it glide past was to feel a deep reminder that life can bend itself into any form necessary, even those that seem impossible to us. The existence of the Mariana snailfish also forces scientists to rethink what life might look like elsewhere in the universe. If a creature with paper-thin skin can thrive under crushing pressure, then why should oceans sealed beneath miles of ice on distant moons be considered lifeless? The snailfish becomes not only a wonder of our own planet, but a symbol of what life may be capable of beyond it. The thought is both fascinating and terrifying, because if life can exist in such delicate forms here, then it may be waiting for us in places we have barely begun to imagine. For those who encounter it, the snailfish is not only a scientific marvel, but an emotional one. Its very shape stirs unease. We are used to imagining strength as armor, survival as toughness, and endurance as weight and power. The snailfish breaks that pattern completely. It tells us that sometimes survival means becoming almost nothing, a wisp of jelly, a body so fragile it cannot be harmed. The paradox unsettles us because it does not fit the stories we tell ourselves about nature, about strength, or about survival. In the abyss, the Mariana snailfish glides silently, fragile and invincible, a riddle written in flesh, and as researchers watch its pale body vanish back into the blackness, they are left with the same lingering thought. If something this delicate can thrive in the trench, then what other paradoxes of life might still be waiting to be found deeper in the dark? From this ghostly survivor, the journey into the trench only grows stranger. The abyss does not only create delicate paradoxes, it also breeds predators that light the darkness with lures, creatures that hunt with glowing traps in a world where sunlight never shines. From the fragile body of the Mariana snailfish, drifting like a pale ribbon through the depths, the descent continues into stranger and more menacing forms. For in a world without sunlight, survival depends on invention. Here, in the eternal night of the trench, predators have evolved weapons of light, lures that glow in the blackness to trick, to dazzle, and to draw prey close enough to strike. When cameras first captured these creatures, the images seemed like something from a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. In the inky black, a small flicker appears, a pulsing spark that seems innocent enough, almost comforting in its glow. But this is not a harmless shimmer, it is bait. Hanging from the head of an anglerfish, the glowing lure swings gently back and forth, a lantern in the abyss. Smaller fish, drawn by curiosity, mistake the light for safety. They move closer, circling the glow, until in a sudden burst of speed, the predator strikes, swallowing them whole in a single motion. The anglerfish itself is grotesque, with a mouth filled with teeth that curve inward like needles, trapping anything that ventures in. Its body is small compared to its gaping jaw, and its skin is dark and leathery, perfectly camouflaged against the black water. But it is the glowing lure, the eerie lantern swaying from its head, that makes it one of the most terrifying hunters of the deep. Scientists watching the footage describe the scene as unsettling in a way that pictures cannot fully capture. It was not just a fish, it was a living trick of the abyss, a deception sculpted by evolution. And the anglerfish is not alone. In the pitch dark, light becomes both weapon and language. Other predators use flashes of bioluminescence to confuse their prey. Some emit sudden bursts of dazzling light to startle attackers and make their escape. Others glow steadily, blending into the faint shimmer of marine snow drifting down from above, disguising themselves until the moment they are ready to strike. To witness these displays is to feel you are staring at magic, yet it is not magic, it is survival, written in flashes of blue and green. Among the most haunting of these luminous predators are the jellyfish. Drifting silently, their long tendrils stretch like ghostly veils, each glowing faintly in the black water. Some pulse with slow, rhythmic light, others flicker like fireflies suspended in the sea. In the beam of a submersible, they appear almost like spirits, translucent bodies glowing from within, their movements hypnotic and slow. Scientists have called them apparitions because they do not seem entirely real, and their beauty is unsettling in its fragility. To see one glowing gently in the dark is to feel the uncanny sense that you are not looking at an animal at all, but at some phantom rising from the abyss. The terror comes not from violence, but from the suggestion of it. These glowing bodies float silently, waiting. Their tendrils dangle, invisible in the dark, until prey brushes against them. In an instant, the glow becomes a trap, and the creature ensnares its victim in a web of stinging threads. To the onlooker, it is as if the light itself has turned against life, betraying those drawn to it. The abyss does not give comfort. Even its light is dangerous. What unsettles scientists most is how calculated these adaptations feel. Bioluminescence is not random. It is precise, tailored to lure or deceive. In the trench, where vision is otherwise meaningless, creatures create their own light and use it as both weapon and disguise. For the researchers watching these displays, there is an eerie sense that the animals are not only surviving, but thriving in a way that feels almost cunning. The thought that evolution could sculpt such illusions deep in the dark leaves them uneasy. Some biologists have described their encounters with these predators as like staring into living nightmares. It is not only their appearance, with teeth like needles and bodies that glow like spirits, but also the way they reveal the trench's strange logic. In this world, light is not the source of life, as it is on the surface. Here, it is a trap. It is the flickering signal of death approaching in silence. And as the submersibles descend further, these living lanterns and glowing phantoms vanish again into the blackness, leaving behind only the memory of their eerie lights. But the abyss does not empty with their absence. It holds still, stranger life, organisms that do not rely on light at all, but on something even more unthinkable, the ability to feed on the lifeless stone of the seafloor itself. After the glowing predators vanish back into the black water, leaving only the memory of their flickering lures and ghostly bodies, the trench reveals something even stranger. Here, in a place that should be barren and lifeless, scientists discovered organisms surviving in a way that feels almost impossible. Not by chasing prey, not by scavenging on the slow rain of dead matter falling from the surface, but by consuming the very rocks of the ocean floor itself. When samples were first taken from the trench, researchers expected to find little more than mud, sand, and fragments of stone. But under microscopes, what they saw left them stunned. Clinging to the grains of sediment and embedded in tiny cracks of rock were microbes that had no visible source of nourishment. They were not feeding on sunlight, for no ray has ever touched this world. They were not scavenging on drifting organic matter. Instead, they were drawing energy directly from the minerals in the rocks around them. These stone-eating microbes use a process called chemosynthesis, a kind of chemistry-driven survival that replaces sunlight with chemical reactions. Where surface plants use the energy of the sun to build life, these microbes use the energy locked inside rocks. They break down the minerals, extracting tiny bursts of power that allow them to grow and reproduce in a world that should otherwise be silent. To the human imagination, the idea of life-consuming stone feels almost mythic, like creatures born from legends that turn earth into sustenance. Yet here it is, real and alive at the bottom of the trench. And this realization changes everything. If microbes can thrive here, clinging to rock where nothing else exists, then the boundaries of life are far wider than we ever believed. What makes this discovery so unsettling is the way it forces us to confront new possibilities. For centuries, humans have imagined life as fragile, dependent on narrow conditions. We thought it needed warmth, sunlight, and the comfort of fertile ground. The trench laughs at these rules. Here, under crushing pressure and eternal cold, life grows from stone. Scientists studying these microbes admit that their presence terrifies them, not because the microbes are dangerous to us, but because of what they imply. If life can survive without sunlight, if it can grow in complete darkness, feeding on what seems lifeless, then life may exist in places far beyond Earth. Suddenly, icy moons circling Jupiter or Saturn, once dismissed as barren, begin to look very different. Beneath the ice crust of Europa lies a hidden ocean, sealed away from the sun for billions of years. On Enceladus, geysers of water burst into space from a buried sea beneath the frozen surface. If stone-eating microbes can exist in the Mariana Trench, what is to stop similar life from thriving there as well? The thought unsettles scientists because it stretches the imagination into places that feel both wondrous and terrifying. If life is this resilient, then perhaps the universe is teeming with it, not in forms we recognize, but in strange alien versions that cling to rock, ice, and chemical whispers. And if such life exists, it may not be simple or harmless. It may have evolved into shapes and behaviors we cannot yet imagine. On Earth, these microbes form the base of hidden ecosystems. In vents and cracks, they provide food for other organisms that graze on them, starting food chains in places thought to be sterile. Entire communities can form around these stone-feeding microbes, webs of survival built on what looks like lifeless rock. To realize this is to feel a shiver of awe. Even in the deepest, coldest trench, life finds a way to turn death into growth, silence into motion. For the explorers who lower submersibles into these depths, the discovery of such microbes is both inspiring and disquieting. Looking at them through microscopes, scientists describe a sense of humility, as if the trench itself is reminding humanity that we do not yet understand the full story of life. We believed we needed sunlight to exist, yet here is life proving us wrong in the most haunting way. And if microbes can carve existence out of stone, what else might be hidden deeper still? The trench offers no answers, only more mysteries, each stranger than the last. For every grain of sand alive with unseen activity, there may be predators and parasites lurking in the shadows, ready to twist the rules of survival into even more grotesque shapes. From the microbes that draw life out of stone, the trench reveals yet another layer of survival, one that unsettles the human imagination even more deeply. Because in this silent world, not all creatures thrive by creating, and not all exist by hunting openly. Some have found a way to survive by feeding off others, clinging to their hosts with terrifying efficiency. These are the parasites of the abyss, small but merciless, shaped by evolution into forms that make survival look less like adaptation and more like horror. In the shallows of the ocean, parasites are already common, tiny isopods that crawl into the mouths of fish and replace their tongues, worms that bury themselves into the skin of larger animals, drawing blood drop by drop. But in the abyss, where food is scarce and survival is an endless battle, these parasites have taken their designs to extremes. One of the most disturbing examples are deep-sea isopods, creatures related to the small pill bugs that roll up in your hand on land, but here they grow to monstrous sizes. Some have been found larger than dinner plates, clinging to the bodies of fish and feeding off them slowly. With sharp, claw-like legs, they hold fast against the crushing currents, burrowing into flesh and drawing sustenance directly from the life they have captured. Their armored shells and cold, unblinking eyes make them look like relics of some ancient nightmare, half crustacean, half machine. To see one attached to a fish is to witness survival at its most ruthless, an animal reduced to nothing more than a living meal. Other parasites in the trench take an even more sinister route. Instead of feeding on the outside of their hosts, they invade from within. Tiny worms and microscopic organisms enter the bodies of larger animals, nesting in their organs, drawing nutrients over time. In some cases, they alter the very behavior of their hosts, forcing them to act in ways that benefit the parasite's survival. A fish that should swim freely instead drifts sluggishly, easy prey for the next predator, ensuring the parasite inside can pass on to a new body once the host is consumed. It is a cycle that feels more like possession than parasitism, as if the abyss itself has learned how to puppeteer its inhabitants. Scientists studying these adaptations describe them with a mixture of awe and unease. Evolution in the trench has no room for kindness, no space for hesitation. It carves out efficiency in the darkest of ways, sculpting creatures that survive not by building but by taking. To a biologist, this is proof of life's ingenuity. To the human heart, it feels like a nightmare. The sheer efficiency of these parasites is what horrifies observers the most. They waste nothing, they exploit every opportunity, and they adapt to every weakness in their hosts. Some even reproduce inside the very bodies they are feeding on, releasing young that spread to new victims without ever exposing themselves to the dangers of the open water. This cycle of invasion, control, and replication is chilling in its perfection. There is no morality here, no pause to the process, only survival at all costs. To see footage of a parasite clinging to a deep-sea fish is to be reminded of the vulnerability of life in these depths. Even the predators of the trench, with their glowing lures and armored shells, are not free from danger. At any moment, a parasite might be feeding silently on them, weakening them, turning their strength into weakness. It is a reminder that in the abyss, no creature stands alone. Every body is a host, every predator may also be prey, and survival can mean becoming the prison of another life. For those who descend into the trench, the idea of parasites unsettles them more than giant predators or faceless horrors. A massive fish can be avoided, a strange sound explained, but parasites remind us that survival can be stolen from within. They are invisible until it is too late, patient in their feeding, relentless in their purpose. In them, the trench shows us a truth that is hard to face. Survival does not care for beauty, or fairness, or balance. It cares only for continuation, in whatever form that may take. And as these parasites cling and burrow, reshaping life into hosts for their own survival, the trench deepens its mystery. For not all dangers here come from the creatures themselves. Some arise from what humanity has left behind, toxins and poisons that have drifted into the depths, staining even the most remote corners of this abyss. As if the parasites of the abyss were not disturbing enough, the trench holds an even more unsettling truth, one that does not come from nature at all, but from us. For in this final frontier, in a place so remote and unreachable that no sunlight has ever touched it, scientists have found traces of humanity's shadow. The poison of our world above has slipped silently into the very bottom of the ocean, embedding itself into creatures that should have been untouched. When researchers captured amphipods from the depths, small crustaceans that scurry and swarm along the seafloor, they expected to study their strange biology. What they did not expect was to find these creatures laced with chemicals that had no place in such an isolated environment. Laboratory tests revealed concentrations of PCBs, or polychlorinated biphenyls, within their bodies. These are industrial chemicals, once widely used in paints, plastics, and machinery, that were banned decades ago because of their toxic effects. Yet here they were, preserved in the flesh of animals living at the bottom of the deepest ocean trench. The realization was horrifying. PCBs do not break down easily. They resist decay, clinging to particles that drift through air and water. Over time, they travel farther than we ever imagined possible, settling into soils, rivers, and seas. Eventually, they found their way into the Mariana Trench, carried by the endless fall of marine snow, that slow rain of organic debris that sinks from the surface to the abyss. Bound to these tiny fragments, the chemicals were delivered straight into the stomachs of trench organisms, embedding themselves into the very web of life. For the scientists holding those samples, the discovery felt like a violation. The trench had always been imagined as a place separate from us, a sanctuary of sorts, cut off from the pollution and destruction of human civilization. If anywhere was pure, it should have been here, nearly 7 miles beneath the ocean's surface. Yet even here, in this dark cathedral of pressure and silence, the fingerprints of industry were found, etched into the bodies of small, delicate creatures. The levels of PCBs in some of these amphipods were shockingly high, comparable to levels found in some of the most polluted rivers on Earth. The trench was not a sanctuary, it was a sink, a place where the world's refuse eventually settled. That truth is chilling because it reveals that there is no such thing as an untouched corner of our planet. Even in the deepest, most remote abyss, life carries within it the scars of human activity. The implications stretch beyond biology. If toxins banned for decades are still found in the deepest ocean, it means our actions echo far longer than we want to believe. Chemicals released generations ago continue to travel, continue to poison, long after we have forgotten them. The trench becomes not just a record of Earth's geology, but of humanity's mistakes, a silent archive of everything we have poured into the seas. For the biologists studying these poisoned amphipods, the feeling was not only sadness but dread, because if we have reached even here, then what other damage are we leaving behind in places we have never seen? The discovery forces us to ask if the trench, with all its alien horrors, is not terrifying enough on its own. Now it carries the added burden of human contamination, a reminder that our reach extends farther than our control. and the animals themselves, carrying these toxins in their bodies, become unwilling messengers. They remind us that nothing we discard is ever truly gone. It all finds its way back into the cycle of life, into the flesh of creatures, into the flow of ecosystems that extend beyond our sight. To poison the trench is to poison one of the last untouched mysteries of the world, a haunting revelation that scientists still struggle to absorb. As these amphipods scuttle across the seafloor, glowing faintly under the lights of submersibles, they carry with them not only the strange adaptations of the abyss, but also the hidden weight of our world above. They are proof that even here, in the most extreme and unreachable places, humanity has left its mark, and from this discovery, the story of the trench only grows darker. Because not only are toxins preserved in living creatures, but plastic too has found its way into the very belly of Earth's deepest wound. From the poisoned amphipods that carry chemicals banned long ago, the story of the trench takes an even darker turn. If toxins were not enough to prove humanity's reach, another discovery confirmed that no place on this planet remains untouched. For when scientists lowered nets and instruments into Challenger Deep, the very deepest point of the Mariana Trench, they found something that should never have been there. In every single sample of water, in every scoop of sediment, tiny fragments of plastic were present, drifting and swirling in the belly of the earth itself. These were not just large pieces of floating debris. No bottles or bags were caught in the nets at these depths. What researchers found instead were microplastics, particles smaller than grains of rice, broken down from larger objects discarded long ago. Carried by currents, sinking with the marine snow of dead organisms, or swept into the abyss by storms and rivers, these particles had traveled farther than any human ever could, falling into the trench until there was no deeper place left to go. The shock of this discovery was profound. For decades, scientists had described the trench as Earth's final frontier, a realm so remote and so alien that it seemed untouchable. Yet when the samples were examined under microscopes, the truth was inescapable. Humanity's waste had arrived before us. Even in the deepest pocket of the ocean, the fingerprints of our civilization were etched into the environment. For the scientists who made this discovery, the reaction was not only scientific interest, but deep sadness. Imagine descending into the blackest place on the planet, expecting to encounter life in its most unspoiled form, and instead finding the same pollution that fills rivers, coastlines, and beaches. The Mariana Trench, the place most cut off from human presence, is carrying the same scars as the world above. Some of the plastic fragments were so small that they could slip unnoticed into the bodies of trench organisms, becoming part of their flesh. Amphipods and other scavengers feeding on marine snow likely ingest these fragments regularly, passing them along to predators in a chain that stretches through the abyss. The thought is chilling, because it means the deepest ecosystem on Earth, once thought beyond our reach, is now bound up with our waste in ways we may never fully untangle. What terrifies biologists is not only what has already been found, but what it means for the future. Plastic does not simply vanish. It breaks apart into smaller and smaller pieces, fragments that last for centuries, perhaps millennia. Each wave, each current, each storm will carry more of it downward. The trench, the lowest point of the earth, is destined to become a graveyard of plastic, a sink where humanity's discarded fragments will continue to collect long after we are gone. The symbolism of this discovery unsettles many who study it. For millions of years, the trench has served as a record of the planet itself. Layers of sediment preserve the history of life, from ancient fossils to chemical traces of long-vanished eras. Now, layered into that archive, are fragments of human plastics, colors and shapes that do not belong. Future generations, or perhaps future civilizations, may find this layer and know it as the age when humans filled even the deepest abyss with their waste. And yet, beyond symbolism, there is also the quiet horror of what this pollution means for life today. Each fragment ingested by an amphipod, each particle lodged in the body of a snailfish or a jelly drifting in the dark, adds an invisible burden. The trench is not only a place of crushing pressure and grotesque adaptations, it is now a place carrying the weight of humanity's mistakes, poisoning life in ways we cannot see and cannot yet measure. For those who witnessed these findings firsthand, the mood was heavy. It was not like seeing a monstrous fish or hearing unexplained sounds. It was something worse, because it was familiar. It was the unmistakable proof that the trench is no longer alien. It is part of our world, polluted and scarred, and in that realization lies the true terror. For if even the deepest place on earth is no longer pure, what place could possibly be? As the microplastics drift invisibly through the currents of Challenger Deep, they serve as a haunting reminder. The abyss, once thought beyond our reach, is now tied to us forever. And from this poisoned silence, the trench continues to reveal life that is stranger still, ghostly beings so unclassifiable that even the most experienced scientists cannot decide what they are. From the poisoned silence of microplastics drifting in Challenger Deep, the journey deeper into the abyss brings encounters that move beyond the unsettling into the truly inexplicable. For while toxins and plastic reveal the reach of humanity, there are discoveries here that belong entirely to the unknown. Creatures so strange, so unlike anything in the catalogs of biology, that even the most experienced scientists are left shaken, whispering into their microphones as the cameras record forms that should not exist. These are the gelatinous blobs of the trench, strange apparitions that drift in the water with no clear structure, no recognizable organs, no skeletons or shells, nothing that fits into the neat categories of taxonomy. When the first of these blobs appeared on camera, researchers stared in silence, unsure even of what part of the creature they were looking at. It seemed to hover without effort, translucent and shifting, its body swaying as though it were more liquid than flesh. Unlike fish or crustaceans, these blobs do not carry familiar signs of life. They have no eyes, no mouths that can be clearly identified, no fins or legs to propel themselves. Instead, their bodies are amorphous, changing shape as currents push against them. At times, they appear spherical, glowing faintly under the lights of submersibles. At other times, they stretch into eerie ribbons, dissolving at the edges like smoke drifting through water. For taxonomists, whose work depends on structure and classification, these creatures are maddening. Life is usually named and placed according to the features it carries, but here in the trench, those rules fall apart. What do you call something that has no clear beginning or end? How do you describe a creature that looks less like an animal and more like a ghost? Scientists have attempted to link these blobs to known families of jellyfish or siphonophores, but the evidence remains elusive. Many of the recorded specimens simply do not match anything in the catalogs. The appearance of these blobs is what unsettles observers most. On the camera screens, they look like apparitions, pale and translucent, floating just at the edge of sight. Some pulse faintly with bioluminescent sparks, flashes that ripple across their bodies before fading back into darkness. Others seem to have no light at all, drifting like empty sacs, featureless and formless. The effect is haunting. They do not look alive, yet they move with intent. They do not look like predators, yet their presence fills the mind with unease. What makes them truly terrifying is the reminder that they are not mistakes. They are not malformed accidents of evolution. They are thriving in one of the harshest environments on the planet, adapted in ways we cannot yet understand. Their strange, gelatinous forms may be perfectly designed for survival under crushing pressure and freezing water. Perhaps they are efficient in ways our eyes cannot perceive. Perhaps their very lack of form is what allows them to endure. Scientists who have witnessed these blobs firsthand admit that they disturb them more than the fanged predators or the armored giants of the trench. A creature with teeth and claws is frightening, but it is understandable. It follows rules we know. It hunts, it feeds, it survives. But a formless blob, pulsing faintly in the dark, resists explanation. It feels like something from another dimension, something that slipped through the cracks of biology and found a home in the abyss. The recordings of these creatures are often played again and again, studied frame by frame, yet the sense of mystery only deepens. Each time, the blobs seem less like animals and more like the trench itself given shape, fragments of the unknown rising into view before fading back into blackness. To the scientists watching, they embody the abyss in its purest form, not monstrous, not predictable, but unknowable. As one biologist put it after reviewing hours of footage, these are the living nightmares because they give us nothing to hold on to. Without clear eyes, or jaws, or even bones, there is no way to anchor them in our understanding. They simply exist, ghost-like, and remind us that our grasp of life is incomplete. And so, the blobs drift silently on, haunting the cameras with their presence. They are proof that the trench holds more than danger. It holds shapes and forms that we cannot even name. And from these apparitions, the abyss shifts again, revealing not just fragility or formlessness, but adaptations so precise that they feel engineered. Creatures with blood that flows like antifreeze, designed to resist death itself. From the ghostly blobs that drift like apparitions in the abyss, the trench offers yet another twist in the story of survival. If faceless horrors and formless shapes unsettle the imagination, then what comes next reveals just how far life is willing to bend itself in order to endure. In the crushing cold of these depths, where water hovers only a fraction above freezing, scientists discovered fish that should not be alive at all, and yet they are, thanks to something hidden within their very blood. These creatures possess antifreeze proteins flowing through their veins, a natural adaptation so precise that it sounds more like invention than biology. In ordinary animals, blood would freeze solid at such temperatures, ice crystals forming inside cells and tearing tissue apart from within. Death would come quickly and mercilessly. But in these deep-sea survivors, the antifreeze proteins prevent ice from forming at all. They bind to tiny ice crystals before they can grow, halting their spread, keeping the blood liquid and the body alive. To the scientists who first discovered this, the adaptation felt almost unbelievable. Life had not just adjusted to the cold, it had rewritten the rules of biology to resist death itself. The fish swam slowly but confidently through waters that should have been lethal, their bodies pale and fragile looking, yet shielded from freezing by a molecular trick invisible to the human eye. The unsettling part is how absolute this adaptation is. These creatures are not surviving on the edge of possibility. They are thriving in conditions that would destroy anything else. Their blood is a quiet defiance of nature's limits, an answer to the question of how far life can go when pressed against the edge. For biologists, it is a revelation that shakes the very idea of what is possible. The antifreeze proteins are more than just survival tools. They are symbols of life's refusal to surrender, even when placed in an environment that seems designed for extinction. The trench strips away warmth, light, and safety, yet here are fish whose very veins carry the solution. To imagine this is to realize that evolution is not only creative, it is relentless. It engineers life to withstand what should be the end. Researchers watching these fish describe the feeling of awe mixed with dread. It is not the shock of teeth or the grotesque shape of a faceless horror. It is something quieter but far more disturbing, the realization that life is harder to kill than we ever imagined. If even blood itself can be rewritten to resist freezing, then perhaps nothing is too extreme for survival. The abyss becomes not just a place of monsters, but a place where biology refuses to surrender in ways that seem almost unnatural. Some scientists point out that these antifreeze creatures may provide the strongest argument yet for life beyond Earth. If blood can be re-engineered to survive freezing oceans on Earth, then what is to stop similar life from existing beneath the ice of Europa or Enceladus? In those alien seas, cut off from sunlight for billions of years, survival might not mean warmth at all. It might mean antifreeze coursing through veins, proteins sculpted to resist death in worlds as cold as the trench. The thought is exhilarating, but it is also terrifying, because if life can persist under such extremes, then it may be far more common than we hope, and if it exists elsewhere, it may not be fragile. It may be just as relentless, just as unwilling to die as the trench has shown us. The abyss does not only show us horrors in shape, it shows us horrors in endurance. Creatures that should be fragile, that should perish, instead carry inside them the very chemistry of survival. To hold one of these fish in your hands, scientists say, is to feel a contradiction. The body seems delicate, thin-skinned, easily torn, yet within, the blood flows with a power that keeps it alive against all odds. The contradiction unsettles the human mind because it reminds us that appearances mean nothing in the abyss. Strength may be hidden, not in armor or teeth, but in molecules humming silently inside every drop of blood. And so, the fish glide slowly through the black water, fragile yet unstoppable, their lives sustained by antifreeze that denies the finality of cold. They are not dramatic in appearance, not monstrous or grotesque. Yet, they carry with them one of the most chilling lessons the trench has given us. Nothing is too extreme for survival. From this eerie adaptation, the abyss shifts again. For while some creatures flow with life in their very blood, others survive not by innovation, but by feeding on the endless remains that drift down from above. In the trench, even death itself becomes a resource, and the seafloor turns into a slow-motion graveyard. From fish whose very blood resists death, the descent into the trench reveals another truth, one that is quieter, but far more haunting. For all its strange adaptations and living nightmares, the Mariana Trench is also a graveyard. In this place of darkness, where the cold and pressure keep silence eternal, death itself is never wasted. Every organism that lives in the oceans above eventually falls downward, slowly, silently, until it joins what scientists call marine snow. Marine snow is not snow at all, though it drifts through the water with the same delicate motion. It is made of tiny fragments, the remains of plankton, fish scales, fecal pellets, and the decomposed bodies of organisms that once thrived in the upper seas. Each particle begins its journey when life ends above. Over hours, days, sometimes weeks, it drifts downward, tumbling gently through the water, glowing faintly in the light of submersibles before vanishing back into darkness. At the surface of the ocean, life may appear vibrant and full, but here in the trench, it falls constantly as a slow, endless rain of death. To watch marine snow drift in the abyss is unsettling in its beauty. Against the black water, it looks like a snowfall suspended in time, countless specks of white sinking into eternity. But each piece is a fragment of decay. Each glowing fleck is the memory of something that once lived, now feeding a world that survives entirely on death. For the animals at the bottom, there is no sunlight to power growth, no plants to harvest energy. Their existence depends on what falls. The trench is not just an ecosystem, it is a recycling pit of mortality. Crabs scuttle across the seafloor, picking at the remains of fish that drifted down from far above. Amphipods swarm over carcasses, stripping them to bone in hours. Sea cucumbers sift endlessly through the mud, drawing energy from particles so small they are invisible to the human eye. For them, the rain of marine snow is life itself. Without it, there would be nothing. With it, survival is possible, though grim and slow. Scientists describe this process as a slow-motion horror show. For every body that falls, there is a chain of feeders waiting, each adapted to take advantage of decay. The spectacle is not violent or fast, but patient, relentless, and inevitable. Unlike the hunts of predators, which are over in seconds, this consumption stretches out for hours, days, and even longer. Flesh dissolves slowly, bones weaken and fracture, until what once lived is indistinguishable from the mud. Nothing is wasted, nothing is allowed to rest. Even large animals, whales and sharks, eventually join this descent. When a whale dies near the surface, its body may sink for miles before striking the bottom. Once it lands, the feast begins. Whole communities gather, drawn by scent and hunger. Crustaceans gnaw at blubber, worms burrow into bone, microbes colonize the skeleton, breaking down even the hardest structures over years. To the animals of the abyss, a whale carcass is a gift, a sudden abundance that may sustain life for decades, but it is also a grotesque sight. A body larger than a bus, reduced piece by piece until only fragments remain. The slow-motion nature of this feeding unsettles researchers because it feels endless. Cameras record creatures returning again and again, stripping away layer after layer until nothing recognizable remains. Death is not sudden here. It is stretched into eternity, as though the abyss refuses to let go. What makes this graveyard even more haunting is the silence. There are no cries of predators, no splashes of pursuit, only the soft rain of marine snow, the patient crawling of scavengers, the quiet dismantling of life piece by piece. To watch it is to realize that the trench is not a place of drama, but of inevitability. Every creature that swims in the light above will one day join the slow descent, becoming part of this eternal snowfall. And so, the trench exists as both a cradle and a grave, producing strange new forms of life while feeding them with the endless remains of others. For scientists, this realization is chilling. It shows that the abyss is not only about survival in extremes, but about turning death into fuel. Here, even the end of life has been folded back into the machinery of existence. From this quiet reign of death, the abyss exerts another kind of power, not just biological, but psychological. For humans watching through screens, the slow drift of decay into the depths awakens an unease that is hard to shake. It is not simply the horror of what is eaten, but the reminder that nothing escapes the trench. Everything falls eventually, and in that endless fall, life is broken down into silence. And as the scientists study this graveyard, staring into the slow rain of death, they begin to notice something else. The trench is not only filled with bodies, it also reaches into the human mind, unsettling those who stare too long, stirring a terror that comes not from what they see, but from what they feel in the emptiness of the abyss itself. From the slow rain of marine snow and the endless feeding on death, the trench reveals not only what it does to life, but what it does to the human mind. For as much as the abyss shapes the creatures that dwell within it, it also shapes the people who dare to descend, even from the safety of submersibles or the remote eyes of robotic explorers. Again and again, those who have peered into the blackness of the Mariana Trench describe not only fascination, but something far heavier. A feeling of overwhelming dread, as if the trench itself presses not only on steel hulls, but on the human soul. ROV pilots, operating remote-controlled vehicles from the decks of research ships, often speak about this unease. They sit before glowing screens, guiding the mechanical arms and cameras thousands of feet below, and yet what they describe is not detachment, it is intimacy. Through the cameras, they look into a world that no human eyes were meant to see, and the effect is unsettling in ways few expect. The endless black void beyond the circle of artificial light feels alive, pressing in on their thoughts. Some describe a heaviness in their chest, a chill that has nothing to do with the cold of the ocean air above, but with the silence of the abyss below. The dread is primal. Humans evolved in light, on land and in shallow waters, surrounded by horizons, sound, and the comfort of other living things. In the trench, all of that disappears. The eyes see nothing but darkness beyond a few feet. The ears hear nothing but the hum of machinery. The mind, deprived of familiar signals, fills the void with unease. The abyss becomes a canvas onto which ancient fears are projected: fear of the dark, fear of the unknown, fear of being swallowed whole. One ROV operator described the experience as looking into infinity and feeling it look back. The lights reveal strange creatures for brief moments, pale fish or glowing jelly drifting past, but then they vanish and the darkness returns. Each time, the mind whispers the same thought. Something could be just beyond sight, larger than anything we know, watching silently. The rational mind pushes it away, but the primal part does not. Even scientists, who pride themselves on objectivity, admit that the abyss awakens something ancient in them. It is not just fear of physical danger, though that is always present. The crushing pressure could destroy a submersible in seconds, and everyone knows it. But deeper than that is a psychological terror, the sense of being utterly alone in a place not meant for human presence. The trench is not only a hostile environment, it is indifferent. It does not notice us, it does not welcome us, it simply exists, vast and silent, and that indifference can feel like rejection. Some who descend into the abyss report a strange sensation of isolation, even while surrounded by a crew above. It is the knowledge that their small vessel, or their robotic craft, is the only fragile point of light in an ocean of darkness stretching for miles in every direction. The loneliness of that realization can be overwhelming. It is a reminder of scale, of how small human life is compared to the immensity of the planet itself. Psychologists have studied this effect and found that extreme environments, whether in the deep sea or in outer space, awaken the same responses. The human mind recoils from vast emptiness. When confronted with a void that seems endless, it creates terror that is not only emotional but physical. Heartbeats quicken, muscles tense, breathing becomes shallow. Even when no danger is present, the body reacts as if it is under threat. The trench, in this way, is both a physical abyss and a psychological one. For ROV pilots, the worst moments are often when the cameras pick up nothing at all. No fish, no drifting snow, not even a reflection of light. Just blackness. Staring into that emptiness for hours can erode focus, leaving the mind restless, unsettled, and filled with thoughts that creep in like shadows. They describe it as being stared at by nothing, and that nothing feels heavier than presence. The terror is difficult to explain to those who have not experienced it, because it does not come from what is seen, but from what is imagined. A glowing predator with teeth is frightening, but it can be understood. The black void of the trench, on the other hand, offers no reference point, no shape, no end. It is fear distilled into its purest form, the fear of what might exist, unseen, just beyond the reach of light. And yet, this dread is only part of the story, because as unsettling as the void is to the human mind, cameras have occasionally recorded flashes that break through the blackness, brief bursts of light in places where no source can be explained. And those flashes carry with them their own haunting questions. From the crushing silence and the overwhelming loneliness that gnaws at the human mind, the abyss delivers another kind of terror, one that does not live inside imagination, but inside the camera feeds themselves. For while much of the trench is an endless black canvas, broken only by the faint glow of bioluminescent predators or the drifting fall of marine snow, there have been moments when the darkness itself has cracked open with sudden bursts of light. These flashes, brief but undeniable, have left scientists shaken because their origin remains unexplained. The first reports came during deep expeditions when submersibles and remotely operated vehicles were lowered into the depths with high-resolution cameras running constantly. For hours the screens showed nothing but the familiar emptiness, the beam of artificial lights illuminating drifting particles, the occasional shadow of a snailfish or amphipod, the long silence between sightings. And then, without warning, the screen erupted with a burst, a sudden glow, white and sharp, blooming in the water before fading back into blackness. It lasted only seconds, sometimes less, and left behind nothing. At first, scientists thought it might be equipment malfunction, a flare in the lenses, or a reflection from the submersible itself. But when the recordings were examined closely, the flashes had qualities that did not match mechanical error. They pulsed, expanded, and then disappeared in ways that seemed organic, as if something had truly lit up in the water. The realization sent chills through those watching, because nothing in the known biology of the trench could produce light in this manner. Bioluminescence is common in the deep sea, but it is usually faint and continuous, glowing blues and greens used for lures or camouflage. These flashes, however, were bright, sudden, and seemed to ignite the water like lightning. Some were so intense they briefly illuminated the outlines of objects nearby, the shapes of rocks or drifting clouds of sediment. To see the abyss lit, even for a moment, was to glimpse its vastness in ways that were both breathtaking and deeply unsettling. Speculation began immediately. Could it be geological, perhaps sparks from tectonic activity, friction from shifting rocks and the immense pressure of the subduction zone? The trench sits where two tectonic plates meet, and the grinding of Earth's crust has been known to produce flashes of light closer to the surface during earthquakes. But in these cases, no tremors were recorded, and the pattern of the flashes did not fit. Could it be biological, some unknown creature releasing bursts of light, unlike anything documented before? If so, then what size must such a creature be, to create a glow strong enough to light up the seafloor for cameras stationed far away? The idea is thrilling, but also terrifying, because if life in the trench is already stranger than we can imagine, then perhaps there are predators or entities yet unseen, using light not as a lure, but as something else entirely. The haunting part of these bursts is their inconsistency. They cannot be predicted. Expeditions can spend weeks recording nothing, and then a single pulse appears, so sudden and unexplained that it leaves entire teams whispering in confusion. Some describe the experience as watching the void wink back, as though the abyss itself decided to remind humanity of how little we truly know. Psychologically, these flashes dig into the same unease as the darkness itself. Staring into nothingness creates fear of what might be hiding. But when that nothingness suddenly lights up without reason, it suggests not absence but presence, something active, something alive. It turns the unknown into an even greater mystery. The silence after the flash feels heavier, as if whatever revealed itself has slipped just beyond reach, waiting unseen. Some researchers allow themselves to speculate more freely. Could these flashes be communication, signals exchanged between unknown creatures in the dark? Could they be defensive bursts, meant to blind or startle predators? Or could they be the hunting tools of entities larger than we dare imagine, glowing just long enough to confuse their prey before striking? None of these theories are proven, but all of them leave the mind racing with unsettling possibilities. For those who witness them, the flashes of light in the trench are among the most haunting mysteries of the deep. They reveal nothing, yet suggest everything. They remind us that no matter how much equipment we lower, no matter how many hours of footage we record, the abyss will always hold secrets beyond explanation. And as the last pulse fades back into the blackness, the silence that follows is almost worse than the light itself. Yet the trench does not stop here. Beyond the mystery bursts of unseen light, it reveals another layer of unease, not in strange glows or ghostly blobs, but in chemistry itself, in creatures whose very bodies carry toxins and compounds that seem engineered for danger. After the mystery flashes of light fade back into silence, the abyss reveals yet another unsettling truth. Some of its strangest horrors are not found in monstrous jaws or faceless forms, but hidden within the very chemistry of the creatures themselves. When scientists captured amphipods from the deepest parts of the trench and studied them in laboratories, they discovered something that left them deeply disturbed. Within the tiny bodies of these shrimp-like scavengers were bromine-based compounds, strange chemicals woven into their tissues that may be toxic to humans. At first glance, amphipods do not appear frightening. They are small crustaceans, relatives of the shrimp and krill that drift in shallower seas, and many species are barely the length of a fingernail. In the trench, however, amphipods grow larger, sometimes stretching to several inches long, their glassy bodies pale and translucent, their movements quick and jerking. They swarm in the darkness, feeding on whatever drifts down from above, including the remains of fish, whales, and other fallen creatures. But within these delicate-looking bodies, scientists found a chemical twist that defies expectation. Bromine is an element that, in high concentrations, can be harmful. The compounds discovered in trench amphipods are unusual, not something scientists expected to find in such simple organisms. They are not inherited pollutants, like plastics or PCBs carried down from human activity. These compounds appear to be produced by the amphipods themselves, generated within their bodies as part of their natural biology. Why would such small creatures, living in the most extreme and isolated place on Earth, evolve chemistry that could be poisonous to others? This question unsettles biologists because it suggests that survival in the trench has pushed life into directions we still cannot explain. The most immediate thought is defense. In a world where predators lurk unseen and food is scarce, carrying toxic compounds could make amphipods less desirable prey. Any fish or parasite that tried to feed on them might suffer consequences, turning the amphipods into a dangerous meal. But the disturbing possibility remains that this chemistry could serve other purposes too. Could the compounds be used to outcompete rivals, poisoning other small creatures that share their space? Could they be part of a deeper, unseen chemical warfare unfolding silently in the trench's eternal dark? For humans, the thought is unnerving. If such small, fragile looking creatures carry poisons inside them, what else might be waiting within the larger and stranger life forms of the trench? We often imagine venom as something delivered through fangs or stingers, clear acts of predation. But here, in the belly of Earth, toxins are hidden quietly in the flesh, undetectable until revealed by scientific instruments. It is not an overt threat, but a hidden one, and hidden dangers are often the most terrifying of all. When researchers first confirmed these findings, some admitted to a sense of dread. It is one thing to explore a hostile environment, to marvel at the adaptations that allow creatures to survive in cold, darkness, and pressure. It is another to realize that these same adaptations might make them dangerous, not just to one another, but to us as well. Amphipods may never directly threaten humans, but the principle is what unsettles scientists most. If life can weave poisons into its chemistry at the bottom of the ocean, then survival is not just about shape and form. It is about altering the very building blocks of existence, bending chemistry itself into a weapon. And that thought stretches outward, far beyond the trench. If creatures on Earth can evolve such hidden toxins, what might life on other worlds be capable of? We imagine alien life as strange in form, with tentacles or glowing bodies, but perhaps its true strangeness lies in chemistry. What if survival elsewhere means blood filled with compounds lethal to us, or tissues that carry poisons in every cell? The amphipods of the trench remind us that life is not limited to the patterns we understand. It adapts, it defends, it invents, even at the molecular level. The unsettling part is how quiet it all is. The amphipods swarm across the seafloor, eyeless and translucent, feeding on scraps and drifting in currents, their tiny legs paddling in rhythm. They look harmless, even fragile. Yet inside them is a hidden arsenal, proof that survival in the abyss requires not only strange forms, but strange chemistries. To realize this is to feel the trench close in once more, reminding us that even the smallest creatures here may carry secrets too dangerous to ignore. And from these toxic scavengers, the story of the abyss only grows darker still. For the Mariana is not the only trench on Earth. It is only the beginning, one part of a hidden hadopelagic world that stretches beneath the oceans, filled with horrors that science has only begun to glimpse. From the amphipods that carry venom hidden in their bodies, we turn our gaze outward and realize that the Mariana Trench is not alone. It may be the deepest place we have named, the one most often whispered about, but it is only a single doorway into something far larger. Beneath the world's oceans lies an entire realm of trenches, each stretching miles into the Earth's crust, each dark and almost completely unexplored. Together, scientists call them the hadopelagic zone, a world within our planet that remains almost entirely hidden. The word hadopelagic comes from Hades, the Greek god of the underworld. It is a fitting name because these trenches truly are underworlds of the sea, valleys carved into the seafloor by the slow grinding of tectonic plates, places where light has never reached and pressure climbs to impossible heights. The Mariana Trench may plunge nearly 36,000 feet, but other trenches are nearly as deep. The Kermadec Trench off New Zealand, the Tonga Trench in the South Pacific, the Philippine Trench, the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench, the Puerto Rico Trench in the Atlantic. Each of these is vast enough to swallow mountains, yet most of them have been visited only a handful of times, if at all. Scientists estimate that there are more than 30 trenches scattered across Earth's oceans, most longer and deeper than mountain ranges, and together they cover an area greater than entire continents. Yet less than a fraction of a percent of this world has been explored. The truth is sobering. For all the rockets we send into space, for all the telescopes that capture light from distant galaxies, we have barely glimpsed the underworld of our own seas. What little has been revealed hints at horrors stranger than anything on land. Each trench has its own conditions, shaped by geography, chemistry, and isolation. Some may carry hydrothermal vents, spewing mineral-rich fluids into the black water, feeding colonies of organisms that have never known sunlight. Others may hold creatures adapted to pressures so extreme that their bodies would liquefy anywhere else. And because each trench is separated by vast distances, it is possible that life in one may be entirely different from life in another, evolving along paths that never crossed. This idea unsettles scientists because it suggests that the Mariana is not an exception, but a beginning. If the faceless fish, the glowing predators, the poisonous amphipods exist in one trench, then what unknown life is waiting in the others? We are not looking at a single abyss. We are staring into an entire hidden biosphere, a chain of worlds strung beneath the oceans, as alien to one another as separate planets. Explorers describe the feeling of lowering a submersible into these depths as a kind of descent into another reality. The water grows darker, the light vanishes, and with every mile, pressure mounts until it becomes impossible to imagine. At the bottom, in that Hadal silence, time seems suspended. It is easy to forget that above lies a world of continents and skies. Down here, the trenches belong to themselves, untouched, unmeasured, and largely unknown. The thought that disturbs many is not only that life exists in these places, but that we have no idea what it looks like. If even the Mariana, studied more than any other trench, continues to surprise us with faceless horrors, gelatinous blobs, and creatures with antifreeze blood, then the unvisited trenches may hold forms of life that defy even imagination. It is one thing to speculate about alien seas on distant moons. It is another to realize that Earth itself already contains alien worlds that we have barely touched. Some scientists have begun to call the hadopelagic zone a hidden world within our planet. It is not a metaphor. These trenches are as separate from our daily lives as another dimension. They are cut off, silent, and immense, an underworld that stretches across the globe, waiting patiently for us to look deeper. But to look deeper is not always comforting. Each new discovery, instead of offering clarity, often raises darker questions. If toxins, parasites, and faceless predators can be found in one trench, then what nightmares are hiding in the rest? If the Mariana holds bursts of unexplained light, what might flicker in the blackness of the Tonga or Puerto Rico trenches? The knowledge that there are dozens more abysses scattered across the planet is not reassuring. It is terrifying, and yet the draw of the unknown is irresistible. Scientists keep sending their machines into these valleys, peering into the darkness, searching for fragments of life. And what they bring back each time makes the picture more unsettling. The hadopelagic world is not empty. It is alive, and alive in ways we still do not understand. From here, the story of the trench deepens once more. For the sediment at the bottom does not only hold living creatures, it holds fossils, the remains of ancient life, preserved like whispers of time itself, waiting in silence at the very floor of Earth's hidden underworld. From the hidden world of trenches spread across the globe, each holding life that has never been seen, the gaze of scientists often falls not only on what is alive, but on what has been left behind. For the trench is not simply a home for strange creatures, it is also a tomb, a silent archive where time itself settles and is preserved. At the very bottom of the Mariana and other huddled depths, sediments gather layer upon layer, trapping the remains of organisms from ages long past. These layers become a record of history, a graveyard of lost epochs. Each grain of sediment drifting downward carries with it a story. Marine snow falls from above, but mixed into it are traces of life that ended thousands or even millions of years ago. Shells of tiny plankton sink to the bottom, preserved by pressure and cold. Skeletons of ancient fish, broken and worn by their long descent, finally come to rest in the trench. Even the bodies of whales, reduced to bone by scavengers, may leave behind fragments that become buried beneath layers of mud. With time, these remains compact and settle into a chronology, a layered history that tells of Earth's distant past. Scientists studying cores taken from the trench floor describe the unsettling feeling of looking at slices of time. Each centimeter of mud can represent centuries. Each deeper layer reaches farther into the past until they touch eras when the world above looked nothing like it does today. The fossils locked within these sediments tell of oceans that once swarmed with creatures now extinct, of climates that shifted, of catastrophes that reshaped life. The trench, in this way, becomes not just a place of death, but a vault of memory. What makes this vault disturbing is how silent and complete it is. On the surface of Earth, erosion and weather erase much of history. Wind carries away sand, rivers carve through stone, mountains rise and crumble, but in the trench there is no disturbance. Everything falls into stillness. Once a body or fragment reaches the seafloor, it is swallowed by mud and preserved, safe from the changes above. Time pools here like water in a hollow, collecting and holding the echoes of lives that would otherwise be forgotten. Among the fossils found in trench sediments are the shells of foraminifera, microscopic organisms that lived millions of years ago. Their patterns and shapes, frozen in mud, record the chemistry of ancient oceans, clues to temperatures and currents long vanished. In some cores, scientists have found evidence of extinction events, layers thick with remains from times when life collapsed on a massive scale. The trench remembers these losses with perfect clarity, layering the dead in order, one upon another, without judgment. It is unsettling to think of the trench as a place where all time converges. Life that swam in seas millions of years ago rests alongside the bodies of creatures that died only yesterday. The abyss holds them together, without separation, without pause, and endless accumulation of endings. To hold a fossil from the trench is to hold not just an ancient creature, but the weight of time itself, compressed and silent, a reminder of how small human lives are in the measure of Earth's history. For the scientists who descend to collect these sediments, the work feels eerie. They lower drills into the seafloor, bringing up columns of mud that look unremarkable at first glance. But under microscopes and careful examination, those columns reveal secrets stretching back millions of years. It is like unrolling a scroll written in the language of shells and skeletons, a story that no one alive witnessed, yet which still whispers in the silence of the trench. And this realization brings another unease. If time itself collects here, then the trench does not only hold the past, it also gathers the present, preserving our age just as faithfully. Mixed with the shells and bones are traces of plastics, pollutants, and chemicals. Future generations, or perhaps no one at all, may look back at these layers and see the mark of humans pressed into the fossil record. The trench will remember us, just as it has remembered everything else. In this way, the abyss is not only a graveyard of lost life, it is a mirror of our own impermanence. Every particle that falls into its depths is preserved, and in that preservation lies a chilling reminder: nothing escapes the slow pull of time. The trench is patient, it waits, it records, it keeps. And as these fossils rest in silence, the trench does not remain still. Life continues to swarm around them, strange and unsettling, including great swarms of transparent shrimp that move together in ways that seem guided by invisible signals, leaving even seasoned researchers unnerved. From the silent fossils buried in the trench, reminders of ages long gone, the abyss shifts once again to reveal not the stillness of the past, but the motion of the present. At first, the cameras capture only drifting snow, the slow fall of particles, the emptiness that has defined mile after mile of descent. And then, without warning, the lights sweep across something alive. Dozens of pale, translucent bodies flicker into view, then hundreds, then thousands. An entire swarm moves together in eerie synchronization, not scattering like ordinary shrimp would, but flowing in unison as if guided by invisible hands. These are the eyeless shrimp of the abyss, transparent creatures that live in numbers so large that their sudden appearance unsettles even seasoned researchers. Each one is small, its body nearly see-through, organs faintly glowing against the beam of the cameras, legs moving in frantic rhythm. But what shocks observers is not their appearance alone. It is their eyes, or rather, their absence. These shrimp are completely eyeless, smooth at the front where sockets should be, adapted perfectly to a world where sight has no meaning. To see one or two of them would be strange enough, but the trench does not deal in single encounters. Instead, these shrimp move in swarms, great clouds of pale, glassy bodies, drifting and pulsing through the black water. The way they move defies easy explanation. They turn and shift together, as though answering silent commands that no human can hear. There is no leader, no signal, at least none that we can measure, and yet the swarm flows like a single living entity. To watch them is to feel the skin crawl, because their unity seems unnatural, almost orchestrated by something unseen. Scientists have described the sight as unnerving, not because the shrimp are large or threatening, but because of what they suggest. In the shallow ocean, animals often school or swarm as protection, guided by vision and quick reaction to movement. But here in the abyss, where light does not exist, the shrimp must follow something else entirely. Perhaps they communicate through vibrations in the water, or perhaps chemical signals guide them, or perhaps it is something we cannot yet understand, an instinct or perception beyond our senses. The thought unsettles researchers because it hints at abilities hidden in the trench, adaptations that may never evolve in the light of the surface world. To imagine thousands of creatures moving with a single unseen awareness is to imagine intelligence of another kind, not the sharp mind of a predator, but the collective consciousness of a swarm. What might such awareness feel like from within? Do the shrimp act as individuals, or do they exist only as fragments of a larger whole? The trench does not give answers, only more questions, each one darker than the last. The effect of the swarm on human observers is profound. Through the cameras, the eyeless shrimp appear ghostly, their bodies illuminated by artificial light before vanishing back into the black water. For ROV pilots, the sight can linger long after the screens go dark. One described it as staring into a moving fog of glass, a storm of life that seemed to follow its own rules, indifferent to the presence of machines. Another said it felt like looking into a crowd that could sense them, though no eyes stared back. The shrimp themselves are not predators. They feed on the drifting snow, scraping nutrients from the endless fall of organic particles. Yet their overwhelming numbers and their synchronized movement give them an air of menace. It is not what they do, but how they move, that unsettles the imagination. The swarm feels less like animals feeding and more like an entity breathing, expanding and contracting with invisible rhythm. For scientists, studying these swarms is difficult. Nets can capture individuals, but never the phenomenon itself. The moment the shrimp are separated from their group, they become ordinary. They twitch, they feed, they drift aimlessly. The power of the swarm exists only in the abyss, only when they are together. That unity cannot be bottled or studied fully in a laboratory. It belongs to the trench, and to the trench alone. The unsettling truth is that life here has formed patterns we cannot yet decipher. The shrimp remind us that survival in the abyss is not just about strange bodies or chemical tricks, but about behaviors shaped by forces unseen. And just as these creatures move to rhythms we cannot understand, others in the trench live at timescales equally alien, their lifespans stretching far beyond anything familiar to the human world. From the ghostly swarms of eyeless shrimp, moving together as if guided by signals no human can perceive, the abyss reveals another truth, one that unsettles in a quieter but deeper way. It is not only the shapes of the creatures that disturb, or the strange chemistries that flow through their bodies. It is also their relationship with time itself. Down here, in the silence and the dark, life slows to a rhythm that feels almost unnatural. Creatures in the trench do not measure their existence in years, as we do. Some may live for centuries, their lifespans stretching far beyond the limits of what we consider possible. The reason for this lies in the extreme conditions of the deep. In the crushing cold, where water temperatures hover just above freezing, metabolism slows to a crawl. Every heartbeat, every breath, every movement happens at a fraction of the speed seen in the light-filled seas above. Energy is scarce, and so life adapts by conserving it. Growth is measured not in days or months, but in decades. Reproduction happens rarely, sometimes once in a lifetime. Survival is bought with patience, and patience in the abyss means longevity beyond imagination. Take the giant amphipods that crawl across the seafloor. They may look fragile, their bodies translucent and soft, but they grow slowly, enduring pressures that would crush any surface creature. Some evidence suggests that they may live for well over 100 years, their lives stretching across the span of entire human generations. Other deep-sea organisms, such as certain species of corals and sponges found near trenches, may live even longer, their lifespans measured not in centuries, but in millennia. These colonies, silent and unyielding, have been alive longer than many human civilizations have existed, their tissues preserving a memory of oceans long vanished. The thought is unsettling because it forces us to confront time in a way that feels alien. To imagine a creature alive for hundreds of years is to imagine an animal that has watched empires rise and fall without ever surfacing. It is to realize that some of the trench's inhabitants may have been alive before our nations were born, feeding slowly in silence while history unfolded above. To look into the eyeless face of a deep-sea amphipod is, in a sense, to look into the past itself, still moving, still feeding, still alive. Scientists admit that this longevity frightens them in ways they did not expect. Predators with teeth and glowing lures can be explained by adaptation. Poisonous chemistries can be studied under microscopes, but time is harder to face. It is invisible, yet it shapes everything. The idea that life can endure for centuries in silence, untouched and unchanged, feels unnatural to our sense of the world. It suggests that in the abyss, even time obeys different rules. The slow pace of deep-sea life also makes encounters more chilling. Some creatures seen on camera may have been alive since before the technology to film them even existed. A fish drifting across a trench slope might be older than the very ships that sent the submersibles down to watch it. This inversion of expectation leaves scientists shaken. We like to believe we are the observers of life, but in these moments, it feels as though life in the trench has been observing us all along, waiting patiently for us to notice. What terrifies most is not simply the length of these lifespans, but what they imply about resilience. To endure for centuries in darkness means these creatures are not fragile curiosities. They are survivors of the highest order, perfectly suited to a world that seems designed to extinguish life. Their very existence is a reminder that life in the abyss is not temporary. It is permanent, persistent, and older than many of the things we take for granted. The trench, then, becomes not just a graveyard of fossils, but a living archive. Its creatures embody time itself, their lifespans stretching across human eras, their silence outlasting the noise of history. And if life can persist in such slow rhythms here, it suggests that longevity may be one of nature's most powerful weapons. To survive is not always to grow quickly or to reproduce often. Sometimes, survival means waiting, enduring, and outlasting everything else. As unsettling as this truth is, the abyss does not stop at longevity, for time is not the only force hidden in these depths. The trenches are carved by tectonic plates, vast scars in the Earth's crust, and with them comes a threat even more terrifying than biology. The same valleys that preserve fossils and harbor ageless creatures are also fault lines capable of unleashing earthquakes and tsunamis that can devastate entire nations above. From the unsettling truth of creatures that live longer than entire human nations, the abyss reminds us that it is not only biology that terrifies, but geology as well. For the Mariana Trench and its siblings around the world are not just abysses of life and death. They are also colossal scars in the Earth's crust, the very boundaries where tectonic plates grind against one another in slow, unstoppable motion. These meeting places of rock and pressure are the birthplaces of some of the most catastrophic events our planet can unleash. The trench itself lies where the massive Pacific Plate is forced beneath the smaller Mariana Plate in a process called subduction. Imagine a continent-sized slab of rock sliding slowly downward into the Earth, carried under another plate with unimaginable force. This process happens silently, inch by inch, year by year, but the pressure it builds is enormous. The plates do not glide smoothly. They stick, they grind, they lock together, and as they strain against one another, energy builds. When that energy finally releases, the Earth shudders with earthquakes that can shake whole regions, and in the ocean, those quakes can trigger tsunamis that race across entire seas. Geologists study these subduction zones with both awe and dread. They know the trench is not simply a deep hole in the ocean floor, but a sleeping giant, a system capable of unleashing destruction far beyond its own borders. A single slip between the plates could send shock waves powerful enough to level cities. A single rupture along the fault could displace billions of tons of seawater, raising walls of water that sweep toward coastlines with terrifying speed. History offers sobering reminders of what these forces can do. The 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake, caused by a similar subduction zone, released energy equal to thousands of nuclear bombs and generated a tsunami that killed more than 200,000 people in countries thousands of miles apart. The 2011 Tohoku earthquake off the coast of Japan, again born of a subduction trench, sent waves surging into coastal towns, toppling buildings, sweeping away lives, and even damaging nuclear power plants. These events were not small local disasters. They were global shocks, felt in after effects that rippled through economies, infrastructure, and human memory. When geologists look at the Mariana Trench, they cannot help but imagine what it might be capable of. It has all the ingredients: massive plates grinding against each other, enormous depths where pressure and stress accumulate, and a long history of tectonic activity. While no one can say when or where the next rupture will occur, the knowledge that it could happen is enough to fill scientists with unease. The trench, in this sense, is not only an ecological frontier, but a geological time bomb, its silence masking a power that dwarfs anything living within it. For the human imagination, the idea is terrifying. The creatures of the abyss may inspire fear with their alien forms, but they remain confined to their world, bound by their own environment. The tectonic forces of the trench, however, are not bound. When the Earth shifts here, the consequences reach across continents and oceans, striking cities where millions of people live, far from the abyss itself. It is a reminder that the trench is connected to us in ways we cannot escape. Scientists describe subduction zones as locked and loaded. It is an ominous phrase, chosen deliberately because it suggests inevitability. Pressure builds silently, invisibly, for years or even centuries, and then one day it releases without warning. The earth heaves, the sea rises, and in minutes, coastlines can be erased. That is the nightmare geologists carry when they study these depths. Not just the mystery of what lies there, but the certainty of what lies beneath, an engine of destruction waiting for its turn. What makes the thought even more haunting is how little warning such an event might give. The deep-sea instruments that monitor tectonic stress are limited, and our ability to predict earthquakes remains fragile. Humanity has mapped the moon in greater detail than the seafloor where these giants rest. We know the forces exist, we know they have erupted before, and we know they will erupt again. The question is not if, but when. And so, the Mariana Trench is not only a biological wonder or a graveyard of fossils, it is also a fault line of unimaginable power, a sleeping beast buried in the Earth's crust, capable of shaking the surface world with one violent breath. For geologists, this reality is perhaps the most terrifying of all, because it means the abyss is not only hidden in darkness, it is reaching upward, tied directly to the lives of millions who may never see it. From this geological terror, the story of the trench deepens further still, because beneath these shifting plates, scientists have found evidence that volcanic fire also lurks in connection with the abyss. The same systems that produce earthquakes and tsunamis may also be tied to supervolcanoes, eruptions so powerful they could change the climate of the entire planet. From the grinding pressure of tectonic plates and the fear of earthquakes that can ripple across oceans, another shadow emerges from the trench. For the Mariana system is not just a fault line of movement, but also a furnace of hidden fire. Subduction zones, where one tectonic plate slides beneath another, are not only places of crushing pressure, they are also places where rock melts, gases build, and magma pools silently in chambers deep within the earth. It is here, beneath the abyss, that scientists fear the possibility of supervolcanoes tied to the trench itself. The thought unsettles even seasoned geologists. A supervolcano is not like ordinary eruptions, not even like the ones that destroy mountainsides or blacken skies for weeks. A supervolcano is an event of planetary scale. It releases so much ash, gas, and molten rock that entire climates are shifted, skies darken, sunlight weakens, and temperatures plummet. Entire species can vanish under the weight of such an event, and in the past, Earth has endured these catastrophes before. The eruption of Toba in Indonesia about 74,000 years ago is believed to have brought humanity close to extinction, its ash cloud choking the atmosphere for years, cutting populations down to mere thousands. To imagine such a force tied to the trench is to imagine disaster on a global scale. The Mariana System sits along the Pacific Ring of Fire, a vast circle of volcanic and seismic activity that produces the majority of the world's earthquakes and eruptions. Here, the subduction of plates not only forms the trench, but also feeds chains of volcanoes across the Pacific. The islands that rise near the trench, small arcs of land scattered in endless sea, are themselves the peaks of volcanoes born from this fiery process. The question scientists ask, though, is not whether volcanic activity is present. It is whether the conditions exist for something far larger, something so violent that it would reach beyond the Pacific and change the balance of the entire planet. If a supervolcano erupted in connection with the trench, the effects would not be local. The ash could circle the globe, blotting out sunlight. Crops could fail across continents. Weather systems could collapse into chaos. A sudden volcanic winter might follow, bringing famine and collapse to civilizations unprepared for such a shift. For the creatures of the abyss, life would continue in silence as it always has, but for the world above, the consequences would be catastrophic. The most haunting part of this possibility is how invisible it is. The trench hides its geology beneath miles of water. Unlike the towering calderas we see on land, the magma chambers here are buried under crushing oceans. We cannot see them swell, cannot measure their breadth as easily, cannot predict when or if they might erupt. Monitoring equipment is sparse, scattered across a seafloor more poorly mapped than the surface of the moon. Scientists can only watch fragments of data, recording tremors and chemical changes in the water, hoping to glimpse hints of what stirs below. And yet, there are whispers in the record, plumes of heat rising from the depths, strange gases detected near fissures, volcanic islands forming and collapsing along the edges of the subduction zone. Each of these signs is small on its own, but together they hint at the immense power waiting quietly beneath the trench. It is a reminder that beneath the crushing water, beneath the silence of the abyss, there is fire. For those who study the trench, this thought adds another dimension to its terror. It is not only a biological frontier filled with faceless creatures and glowing predators. It is not only a graveyard of fossils or a system of swarms moving with unseen signals. It is also a planetary weapon, a hidden furnace that, if unleashed, could touch every corner of Earth. The Mariana is not just an abyss of water, it is a fault line of fire. And while the thought of a supervolcano simmering beneath the trench is terrifying, the mysteries of its life forms do not retreat. For just beyond the volcanic whispers, cameras have captured shapes that seem to belong to myths. Giant squid drifting through the darkness, stretching arms that match the legends of sailors who swore they had seen monsters of the deep. From the fire that may sleep beneath the trench, the abyss turns its face once more to biology, and this time it does not need invention or speculation to unsettle us. For centuries, sailors told stories of monsters rising from the deep, vast creatures with arms long enough to wrap around entire ships, eyes glowing like lanterns in the night, pulling men and wood alike beneath the waves. They called them krakens, sea demons, leviathans. For generations, these tales were dismissed as fantasy, exaggerations spun by frightened sailors staring too long into storm-tossed seas. Yet in the cold, crushing depths of the Hadal Zone, cameras have shown that some of these legends were never fiction at all. It was through remotely operated vehicles, drifting silently with their lights cutting narrow tunnels into the black water, that the truth began to emerge. At first, the images were brief, shadows too large to identify, movements just outside the reach of the lens. But then came clearer encounters. A massive shape gliding past, arms trailing like ribbons, eyes staring from heads larger than a human torso. The scale was staggering. Some of these squid measured over 40 feet from tip to tip, bodies longer than a bus, arms stretching wider than a house, and these were not isolated reports. Again and again, in trench zones scattered across the Pacific, these giants appeared, captured not by imagination, but by high-definition film. The match to the old sailors' stories was uncanny. Accounts written centuries ago spoke of arms lashing against wooden decks, suckers leaving marks on timbers, and eyes the size of shields glaring through the water. Now, with modern technology, we see that such details were not exaggerations. The giant squid does have suckers lined with serrated edges, strong enough to grip and tear. Its eyes are indeed the largest in the animal kingdom, enormous spheres built to gather the faintest trace of light in the abyss, glowing ghostly when struck by submersible beams. To witness them in motion is to realize that myth has become reality. What unsettles scientists is not just their existence, but their mystery. For despite their size, giant squid remain elusive. They appear rarely, often only as fragments in fishing nets, or in the stomachs of whales dragged ashore. The living creatures, intact and moving through their world, have only been filmed a handful of times, most often near trenches. Their movements are graceful, almost spectral, but also powerful, arms coiling and uncoiling with silent menace. They are predators, feeding on fish and smaller squid, but they also bear scars that hint at battles with sperm whales, circular marks carved deep into their flesh from desperate struggles in the dark. The unsettling part is how much we still do not know. How many of them are there? How large can they truly grow? Some estimates suggest that what has been filmed may not even represent the maximum size, that deeper still, perhaps in zones no human machine has yet reached, there could be squid larger than anything seen so far, monsters that would make even the legends pale in comparison. The thought of such creatures gliding silently through the abyss is enough to awaken the same fear that once haunted sailors in wooden ships, staring into waves and wondering what watched them from below. For scientists, the confirmation of giant squid proves a larger point. The line between myth and reality in the oceans is far thinner than we once believed. Stories dismissed as fantasy can, in time, reveal themselves as distorted truths, born from real encounters with creatures too rare and too alien to be fully understood. The abyss, in this way, does not only hide monsters, it hides evidence that human imagination has often been closer to reality than reason allowed. To watch a giant squid on camera is to feel the scale of the ocean press inward. The submersible, with all its lights and machinery, looks fragile next to the drifting bulk of a creature built entirely for survival in darkness. Its movements are effortless, as though the abyss itself flows through its arms. Its stare, vast and unblinking, leaves scientists quiet. In those moments, even the most rational minds admit to unease, because they realize the old legends were not born from madness. They were born from encounters with realities that we are only now beginning to face. And from these giants, gliding silently in the dark, the abyss reveals yet another grotesque truth. Not every creature discovered in its depths is majestic or terrifying in size. Some are unsettling for another reason altogether. When dragged from the deep to the surface, the same pressure that protects them below transforms them into grotesque caricatures, like the blobfish, a reminder that the trench holds forms of life so alien that they cannot survive in our world at all. From the graceful, unsettling presence of the giant squid, with arms drifting like ribbons through the abyss, the trench delivers a different kind of horror. Some of its creatures are not terrifying because of their size or their power, but because of the grotesque shapes they take when torn from their proper world. Among these strange victims of pressure, none is more infamous than the blobfish, a creature whose very appearance has become a symbol of deep-sea grotesquerie. The blobfish, when it lives in its true home thousands of feet beneath the ocean's surface, is not the gelatinous caricature that photographs have made famous. In its natural environment, the pressure of the water, thousands of times greater than what we feel on land, holds its body together. Down there, it is streamlined, compact, adapted perfectly to float just above the seafloor. It does not waste energy with strong muscles or a rigid skeleton. Instead, it survives with a body of soft, jelly-like flesh, less dense than water, allowing it to hover effortlessly without swimming. It is an elegant adaptation for an environment where conserving energy means survival. But when the blobfish is dragged upward, captured in nets that rise through mile after mile of falling pressure, its body cannot withstand the change. What was once a functional form becomes a grotesque parody. Without the weight of the ocean pressing inward, its tissues expand, its skin sags, and its body collapses into folds of drooping flesh. The fish that looked ordinary in its own world becomes a featureless lump in ours, its eyes bulging, its mouth set into a downturned frown that humans interpret as sadness or disgust. The truth is stranger. The blobfish's famous face is not its natural form at all, but a kind of decompression injury, the result of being forced into a world it was never meant to inhabit. And the blobfish is not alone. Many of the trench's inhabitants suffer the same fate when lifted from the depths. Deep-sea fish that rely on gas-filled organs for buoyancy implode or expand grotesquely when pressure changes. Transparent creatures collapse into shapeless goo. Bodies built to resist the crushing force of the deep turn fragile and misshapen in the open air. What we call ugly or disturbing is often not what these creatures are, but what they become when taken out of the environment that shaped them. For scientists, this reality is both frustrating and fascinating. To study these animals alive is nearly impossible, because the moment they are brought to the surface, their bodies betray them. Special pressurized tanks have been designed to keep some species intact, but most victims of the deep can never be seen as they truly are. Instead, we are left with distorted forms, grotesque victims of pressure changes, reminders that the trench is a world apart. The blobfish, in its way, has become a symbol of this divide. People laugh at its cartoonish face, calling it one of the ugliest creatures on Earth, but the truth is that we are not seeing the blobfish at all. We are seeing what happens when a creature from the abyss is forced into a world it cannot survive in. Its grotesque look is not its essence, but a side effect of human intrusion. This distortion carries a deeper meaning. Life in the trench is not designed for us. It cannot exist in our world, just as we cannot exist in theirs. The trench reminds us of this every time we drag one of its residents upward and watch it fall apart before our eyes. For researchers who descend in submersibles, the grotesque transformations are more than curiosities, they are warnings. They remind us that the abyss is not our home, that its inhabitants live by rules we cannot share. To see a blobfish collapse into folds of sagging jelly is to glimpse the invisible power of pressure, a force so great it can shape bodies into forms unimaginable on the surface. It is a grotesque beauty, not of the creature itself, but of the environment that made it. And as unsettling as these transformations are, they also lead to another thought, one that terrifies even more. If life can become grotesque when torn from its world, what shapes might exist in the depths that we have not yet seen? Creatures so perfectly bound to the abyss that they would never survive even a second in our own realm. What monstrous adaptations lie hidden, preserved by pressure, waiting in darkness for cameras or submersibles to drift across them? The blobfish, then, is not only an oddity, it is a reminder. Life here is not built for us. It is not meant to be taken from its home. What we see as ugly is simply the mark of a boundary between worlds, the trench showing us that the price of survival in its depths is forms that cannot cross into ours. And from that thought emerges an even darker one. Because if the abyss can warp biology so profoundly, how much more of it remains unseen, still hidden, waiting for us in the 95% of the trench we have never explored? From the grotesque transformations of the blobfish, whose sagging flesh reminds us that trench life cannot exist in our world, we are drawn back to a larger and even more haunting realization. For all the strange creatures that cameras and nets have revealed, for all the mysteries uncovered in fragments of footage and samples, the truth is that we have barely touched the surface of the abyss. Scientists estimate that only a fraction of the Mariana Trench, perhaps less than 5%, has ever been explored with modern instruments. The rest, the vast majority, remains in darkness, unvisited, unmeasured, unknown. This truth unsettles even the most rational minds. On land, we map mountains, forests, and deserts until they are familiar. Even the moon, hundreds of thousands of miles away, has been mapped in far greater detail than the trench that lies just beneath our seas. But in the depths of the Hadal Zone, our knowledge falters. What we know is scattered, stitched together from rare expeditions and fleeting glimpses, while the unknown stretches endlessly, swallowing any certainty. And that is where fear begins to take root. For if the trench can already show us faceless horrors, glowing predators, and creatures older than nations in the small fraction we have explored, then what might exist in the 95% we have not? The thought alone is enough to make scientists admit, often reluctantly, that the most terrifying discoveries may still be waiting. Larger predators, stranger chemistries, adaptations beyond anything we have seen, all of them possible, all of them hidden in the blackness. The idea of larger predators unsettles the imagination most. Already, the abyss has given us the giant squid, with eyes larger than human heads and arms long enough to coil around ships. Already, it has given us amphipods the size of fists and snailfish that live at depths thought impossible. If these things exist in the narrow window we have glimpsed, then what giants could be moving unseen in the vastness beyond? Some scientists whisper about unknown species of cephalopods, squid or octopus, so large they make the legends of krakens seem less like exaggerations and more like predictions. Others consider the possibility of fish that dwarf the largest predators we know, their bodies hidden by depths no submersible has yet reached. The abyss does not reveal its secrets easily. Its blackness swallows light, its pressure crushes machines, and its silence hides movement. Remote cameras only capture what passes within their beams. Submersibles travel only where they are lowered, tiny dots of light drifting in a sea of emptiness. Between these narrow glimpses lies a universe of shadow, a world so vast that entire species could exist without us ever knowing. That silence, that possibility, is more terrifying than any single creature. For humans, fear is often born not of what is seen, but of what is imagined. A predator with teeth can be measured, understood, defended against, But the unseen, the possibility that something larger and stranger waits just beyond the edges of vision, is harder to dismiss. The trench feeds this fear perfectly. It offers fragments, flashes of light, ghostly shapes, unexplained sounds, and then it closes again, leaving only questions. It is a stage set for the imagination, and in that imagination, monsters grow. Even seasoned researchers confess that the unknown weighs heavily on them. To lower instruments into the abyss is to admit that the majority of what lies below will never appear on their screens. To explore the trench is to realize that exploration itself is limited, that the deeper they go, the more questions they uncover. For every answer the trench offers, it raises a dozen more. The mysteries multiply faster than the discoveries. This imbalance between what is known and what is hidden creates a sense of dread unique to the deep sea. We cannot comfort ourselves with the illusion of control. The abyss does not yield to curiosity, it swallows it. And the thought that 95% of this place is still unvisited means that our understanding of life on Earth is not just incomplete, it is barely begun. The unsettling truth is that the unknown is not empty. Life thrives here. Life bends into shapes that defy reason, and if such forms exist in the fraction we have seen, the rest must be stranger still. The trench holds its secrets with silence, and that silence is louder than screams. It is the silence of a world that is not ours, a reminder that we are visitors here, blind and fragile, staring into a darkness that hides more than it reveals. And this thought leads naturally outward, for if life thrives in such crushing darkness on our own planet, what does that say about the oceans of other worlds? If Earth hides horrors in its deepest trenches, then the icy seas of moons like Europa or Enceladus may be filled with life just as alien, just as enduring, waiting in their own eternal darkness. From the unsettling truth that 95% of the trench remains unseen, another thought rises, one that stretches far beyond Earth. If such alien forms of life exist here in the deepest shadows of our own world, then what might wait in the oceans of other planets and moons? The question lingers, like a whisper in the dark. If this exists here, what about out there? Astronomers and astrobiologists often point to the icy moons of our solar system as the most promising places to search for extraterrestrial life. Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, is sheathed in ice tens of miles thick, beneath which lies a global ocean larger than all of Earth's oceans combined. Enceladus, a small moon of Saturn, hides a liquid sea beneath its crust, its presence revealed by plumes of water vapor erupting into space through cracks at its surface. These are worlds without sunlight, locked in cold and ice, yet beneath their shells lies liquid water warmed by tidal forces and geothermal heat. In other words, conditions not unlike the abyss we have on Earth. When scientists peer into the trench and watch creatures survive where no sunlight has ever reached, they see more than strangeness. They see possibility. Life thrives here without photosynthesis, without the energy of the sunday. Instead, it feeds on chemicals, minerals, and even stone itself, drawing energy from reactions we once thought too meager to sustain life. If microbes can eat rock in the trench, why could they not do the same beneath the ice of Europa? If glowing predators lure prey in eternal blackness here, could not alien seas swarm with bioluminescent hunters of their own? The implications are chilling. For centuries, humans imagined alien life as distant, green-skinned, or shaped like monsters from our own myths. But the trench has shown us that alien life does not need to exist light years away. It already exists here in forms so strange and unsettling that they feel as foreign as anything from science fiction. Transparent shrimp, faceless fish, giant microbes, creatures with antifreeze in their blood, they are proof that life bends into shapes far stranger than we ever imagined. If Earth itself produces such terrors in the dark, then alien worlds might be filled not with familiar forms, but with their own nightmares, evolved in silence beneath seas of ice. And that thought is terrifying. Because if the trench teaches us anything, it is that life is not fragile. It is relentless. It finds a way in the coldest, darkest, most hostile corners of the planet. If it can do so here, then it can almost certainly do so elsewhere. Life may not be rare in the universe. It may be inevitable. And if it is inevitable, then the horrors of our trench may be common across the stars. Scientists admit this possibility with both wonder and dread. To discover alien microbes on Europa or Enceladus would be profound, proof that we are not alone. But to imagine more complex life, creatures that swim in the darkness of alien seas, raises darker questions. Would they resemble the transparent ghosts of our abyss, or would they take on shapes beyond our imagination? Would they be harmless scavengers, or predators evolved in total isolation, their senses tuned to environments we cannot comprehend? The trench reminds us that the unknown is not always benign. Sometimes it stares back, faceless and unblinking. Even the way we might encounter alien life is tied to what we have seen here. Just as submersibles reveal only fragments of the trench, probes sent to Europa or Enceladus will capture only fleeting glimpses of what lies beneath. A plume sample, a grain of ice, a flash of light caught by a camera that may be all we see at first, and it may leave us with more questions than answers. Just as the trench leaves scientists disturbed by half-seen shapes and unexplained sounds, alien oceans may give us hints that unsettle more than they comfort. The deeper truth is that the trench has already expanded our definition of life. It has shown us that biology is not limited to sunlight, warmth, or comfort. It thrives in extremes, bending itself into grotesque but effective forms, and if such life thrives here, then it is only reasonable to believe it thrives elsewhere. To imagine the trench mirrored across the universe is to realize that Earth may not be unique, and that our deepest horrors could be a common language of survival in space. And so the abyss whispers its final question. If the universe is full of oceans, and if those oceans are full of life, then what shapes wait for us in the darkness? From here, the story of the trench edges toward its closing. For even as we glimpse the strange and terrifying life below, we must remember that so much of it remains hidden, and that the abyss, no matter how much we learn, keeps its greatest secrets in silence. From the whispers of alien oceans beyond Earth, our gaze drifts back once more to the Mariana Trench, the abyss we began with, the scar in our own planet that holds more secrets than we may ever know. We have followed its descent from crushing pressure that can implode steel, to sounds so strange they resemble screams, to creatures that stretch the imagination with faceless skin, glowing lures, and ghostly transparency. We have seen parasites, poisons, and plastics invade even this last frontier. We have seen fossils preserved, like a library of lost time, and swarms that move with invisible coordination. We have walked alongside giants once thought to be myths, and stared into the sagging grotesque of pressure victims that remind us this world is not meant for us. The trench is at once terrifying and wondrous, a place where life proves itself more inventive and more resilient than we ever thought possible. It is not a quiet emptiness, but a living theater of extremes. Every discovery, no matter how small, has shattered expectations. Microbes that eat stone, fish with antifreeze in their blood, shrimp that glow like apparitions. Each revelation is unsettling, not only for what it shows, but for what it implies. For every discovery, there are countless others still hidden in the blackness, waiting in the 95% of the abyss we have never touched. It is this balance of knowledge and ignorance that leaves the deepest impression. What we know is already enough to disturb sleep. Predators that drift like nightmares, swarms that move as one without eyes, toxins that prove we have poisoned even the deepest corners of Earth. Yet what we do not know is even worse. If this is what we have found in the sliver of the trench explored, what waits in the rest? If this is what lives here, in our own oceans, then what horrors might thrive in the seas of other worlds, in alien abysses where life follows rules we cannot imagine? Scientists speak with awe of these discoveries, but also with unease. For to confront the trench is to confront our own smallness. We walk on continents, believing we know our world, but beneath our feet lies an underworld vaster and more alien than the surface itself. The trench is a reminder that Earth is not conquered, it is not fully mapped, it is not even fully known. Our planet still holds places that humble us, places that remind us that life and death, beauty and terror are far larger than human imagination. And so we end not with answers, but with questions. If the trench can hide faceless creatures, how many more remain unseen? If it can preserve the bones of past ages, what future traces of our existence will it remember? If even here, in silence and blackness, life endures, then is life truly rare, or is it everywhere, waiting, thriving, in shadows we cannot yet see? The Mariana Trench is both a mirror and a warning. A mirror because it reflects back our own fears of the dark, the unseen, the unknown. A warning because it reminds us that what lies beneath is not harmless, not passive, but powerful, patient, and indifferent to us. The trench does not care if we look into it. It does not care if we fear it. It simply is, immense and eternal. And if this is what we know, imagine what we don't. If you've enjoyed drifting with me through these depths tonight, if you found yourself both calmed and unsettled, then I would love it if you gave this video a soft like and gently tapped subscribe. It helps this quiet little corner of science reach others who are curious, others who, like you, long for stories that make the world feel bigger and stranger than it seemed before. And if you would be so kind, tell me in the comments where you are listening from tonight and what time it is where you are. I am always amazed at how far these journeys travel, connecting dreamers across the world, one quiet story at a time. So take a deep breath, let your shoulders soften, let the darkness of the trench fade back into the comfort of your room. And as your eyes grow heavy, remember that beneath you lies an entire world that is still a mystery, waiting, silent, alive.